I believe I am live. At least it tells me I'm live, and I guess I am because I see a few folks have joined us. So we'll go through the usual. First and foremost, good afternoon on this beautiful Saturday, August 1st, the weekend beginning my celebration of my birthday this coming Wednesday, God willing, August 5th, in which I will reach the seventh floor of life, meaning I'll be 70 years old. And that being the case, thank you for being part of this celebration today and tomorrow as we continue with the very best in Afro music as we do Facebook and YouTube live from 4 to 6 o'clock. We have some special guests today, so I'm looking forward to it. Some great music and conversation. And I want to thank you on this beautiful day for joining all of us as we share community time. Bueno, mi gente, saludos. Hoy es el día 1 de agosto. Inicia la celebración de mi cumpleaños el miércoles, día 5 de agosto, si Dios permite. Estoy saludable. Y estaré entrando al séptimo piso de la vida, 70 años, 7-0, así que me encuentro en un momento bien bendecido, totalmente y profundamente enamorado de la vida y gracias a cada uno de ustedes por estar con nosotros en este día tan bello y tan maravilloso, por lo menos aquí en Nueva Inglaterra. Yo sé que en el Caribe, en Puerto Rico, Florida, tienen ansiedad por el huracán Isaías, pero de cualquier manera están con nosotros y espero que todos ustedes estén bien y sanos. I hope everyone is well and that all of you are healthy along with your families. And remember, this is not a joke. COVID 19 is for real. Remember to wash your hands, wear masks, and 6 feet of physical distance. But that being the case, on this beautiful day, I'm going to do a sound check and then we're going to go right to some music. And then we're going to bring on guests and we're going to have some good times. All right. Empezamos con la prueba de sonido. La prueba de sonido es la siguiente. Oh, what a beautiful morning. Oh, what a beautiful day. I've got a beautiful feeling. Everything's going my way. Oh, what a beautiful morning. Oh, what a beautiful day. I've got a beautiful feeling. Everything's going my way. One more time. Oh, what a beautiful morning. Oh, what a beautiful day. I've got a beautiful feeling. Everything's going my way. I think that made it. All right, let's go. Let's hear some music, and then I'll talk, and then we'll start with the program. Stay right there. No se vayan.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. 'Twas grace that taught my
can to stand. Oh, but when I look around and I see what's being done to my kind, every day I'm being hunted as prey. My people don't want no trouble. We've had enough struggle. I just wanna live. God protect me. I just wanna live. I just wanna live.
Everything's all right in America if you are all white in America. Óyeme, Cronky.
All right. I thought that in honor of the Honorable Congressman John Lewis and his passing, that we would start off today's program in which we have invited the one and only, the very talented, my dear friend Bobby Sanabria to join us to start off with his rendition of the iconic West Side Story recording America from his album that you saw there, Reimagining West Side Story. And Bobby is already backstage. I see him. He'll be joining us momentarily. And I also have a surprise guest who's going to join us. He is a very talented musician as well, great trumpet player, the son of Barry Rogers, the iconic trombone player that we've been speaking about there in the last few weeks when we had Eddie Palmieri and Reinaldo Jorge and Mango Olivera. He'll be joining us because he played with the one and only Bobby Sanabria with Mongo Sanabria. And we're going to hear some tracks from one of the albums that Bobby recorded with Mongo when he started off after having been at Berklee College of Music. So we have a lot of music, but we have a lot of conversation. And I hope it's rich because I believe it will be. And the pedagogy, as I've said before, for Con Salsa has always been one of sharing our music as a way of making sure that we are proud of our heritage, and in particular our Afro-Latino heritage, as a way of bringing unity and at the same time showing collective strength. All of this, of course, with the idea of empowering all of ourselves so that we can have a better society and that we can do so in the right manner. So the music today will have some messages, but at the same time, the conversation will probably have just as much history and conversation that you will enjoy. Bueno, mi gente, ahí escucharon a Bobby Sanabria, nuestro invitado de hoy, quien estará con nosotros, ya lo veo a él, como también un invitado muy especial de sorpresa, Chris Rogers, el hijo del legendario trombonista Barry Rogers, quien fue fundador junto a Eddie Palmieri de La Perfecta. Chris es tremendo trompetista y estará con nosotros en breve hablando sobre experiencia tocando con Mongo Sanabria junto a Bobby Sanabria, pero también sobre Luz Soloff, tremendo trompeta. Así que si hay trompetistas que están viendo en este momento, Rafael Muriel, quien sea, ponga atención, que hay mucho de qué hablar sobre Luz Soloff. So, we're going to go to some music. Yes, this is Saturday, August 1st, starting off my celebration for my 70th birthday. Alex Rodriguez, it's good to see that you're dancing to the music. Let's get up with the one and only Mongo Sanabria. He titles this one Freedom. Escuchemos al gran Mongo Santamaría. La selección se titula Libertad, Freedom. Saludos a cada uno de ustedes y gracias por ser parte de la familia Con Salsa. Don't forget to share. Let people know that we're on. We're live. Whoa. Here we go. Ready?
ay, ay, qué buenas son las mujeres. Ay, 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 qué buenas son las mujeres. Ay, 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 qué buenas son las mujeres.
So I think you're with me. I hope you're with me. I can see you. I'm hoping you can
I'm
see
here.
and hear me, Chris. Can you see me and can you hear me?
I'm here, baby.
I can hear you and I can see you. Bobby's backstage. He's going to join us soon, but I want to welcome you first and foremost. Thank you on this short notice for joining me. As I told you, when I heard that album and I heard Lou Soloff do those solos, and in particular in Bonita, I said, this is crazy. This is crazy. And I knew how close he was to you to him, and how important he was in your family's life. And so I said, let me call Chris, see if he'll give me a few minutes of his time to talk about not only Lou, but also having recorded it with Mongo and played with Mongo and played with Bobby Sanabria, who's watching us right now before he comes on live. So welcome to the show. We're celebrating 45 years of the very best in Afro-Latin music. As I've told people, this is the beginning of my celebration for my 70th birthday, which will be Wednesday. And Martin Cohen will be our guest tomorrow with Richard Snyder. So we continue this celebration with some good people. And I'm just so thankful that you're here. Let me just say some things in Spanish. La persona que están viendo ahí es el hijo de esta persona. Aquellos salseros, los melómanos que sepan de la música. Esta foto es del libro de Martin Cohen, Congahead, el que tiene el trombón cantando coro junto a George Castro y también con Ismael Quintana es Barry Rogers, legendario trombonista. Conmigo se encuentra el hijo de él, Chris Rogers, tremendo trompetista. Y estaremos hablando sobre esta persona que es Luz Solaf, tremendo trompetista, como también de nuestro amigo el querido Bobby Sanabria, quien grabó en ese disco la batería. Quiero que sepan, la percusión, los timbales y la batería fue nada más y nada menos que nuestro amigo Bobby Sanabria, quien estará con nosotros ya en breve. So, Chris, that was my way of introducing you in Spanish, and I hope that your fans, including Chacha, says there's Chris Rogers, will see this as an opportunity to hear from you for a few minutes. So, the idea that I had was basically we heard those two tracks where Lou performed. I wanted you, if you'd be kind enough, to talk a little bit about Lou Soloff. But before you dive in on Lou and his relationship to your family, our guest of honor, Bobby Sanabria, played on that album, and you also played with Mongo's band with Bobby as one of your bandmates. So, share a little bit about the great, the one and only Bobby Sanabria.
Yeah, well, first of all, Jose, happy birthday a few days in advance.
Thank you.
And it's great to see you again. The last time I think was at Scullers in Boston when I was with Sammy Figueroa.
That's true.
And I'm
Yeah.
so happy you invited me to the show. And it made me so happy to hear this music. You know, we're all sort of secluded in our pandemic, and yet I see your show and I hear the music and I feel so connected. And I see wonderful friends chiming in. I see my friend Angelina from Peru and my friend Cha Cha from New Jersey. It's so wonderful. So I thank you for having me. I hope
Thank
you
you.
can see me and hear me okay. I'm on my iPhone. I was going to be on my computer. Anyway, that doesn't matter now.
Well,
And
the
hello to
telling is
Bobby Sanabria.
Salsa Caliche says se ve y escucha perfecto, so they can see you and they hear you well. Así que no hay problema.
Okay,
Sigue por
beautiful.
ahí.
And I want to say hi to Bobby Sanabria, my old friend. The first time we worked together was with Mongo Santa Maria, way back in 1983 when we recorded Mongo Magic on Roulette Records. And those two songs that you played featured Lou Soloff. I was in the band at the time, and I'm on most of the record. And Lou played a few solos on the record. And yes, I've had a lifelong relationship with Lou, both through my family and through my professional connections. He was also my trumpet mentor, or one of my main mentors. Gave me my first horn when I was 9.5 years old, and I have the sound of Lou in my mind, and we miss him so much. So that was fantastic to hear it. So yeah, I would like just to say a few things about Mongo and then about Lou. um, I was so happy to play in Mongo's band. I played in the band for a year. I only did that one record, Mongo Magic, because ironically, it was Lou who recommended me to join Buddy Rich's band. So I left Mongo's band to join Buddy. I only stayed with Buddy Rich for 5 weeks, and I
Oh my God.
regretted. I still regret that I didn't stay with Mongo because I know that it would have been so great. I love Latin jazz, and I've had the opportunity to work with, many of the greats, Ray Barretto, Eddie Palmieri, Mongo. Um, but my affiliation with Latin music, of course, is peripheral. I'm primarily a jazz trumpeter, so I do regret all that time I missed with Mongo. But I did have a second stint with Mongo in 1991. Another tour with Mongo, and I ended up being his pianist for 2 weeks because Eddie Martinez had to leave the band. Um, so I'm very, very deep in Latin music, and playing with Mongo was an experience that was just so incredible. And hearing that record again just brings back so many memories. And of course, Bobby Sanabria and I were on the band, and it's just so great. This is kind of a little bit of a reunion.
It is.
So that song that you just played, Bonita, featuring Lou Soloff's solo, is not only is it really amazing and a great example of Lou Soloff, but it's very, very unique. Um, Keen listeners and or trumpet players may have noticed that his sound was changing. That alternating between
Mm.
a regular B flat trumpet like this and a little piccolo trumpet. I don't have one handy, but basically half the size of this. And he had both horns, one in his left hand, one in his right hand, in the studio. And what you heard on that track was not overdubbed. I was watching it. That was all live. And he picked up the trumpet and he played. Then there's a coro. Then he picked up the piccolo trumpet and then he played. And I don't know if anyone's ever done that.
Wow.
Even classical trumpet players don't alternate between the instruments. They're different mouthpieces. This is an amazing quality that Lou had, and that he could play the piccolo trumpet in Latin music is really amazing. And I also want to
Hmm.
say one other thing I noticed in the second to last sonero that he played, he cracked a note. But in true Lou Soloff style, he takes the cracked note and instead of it being a mistake, he plays his next two phrases echoing the cracked note. And I just love it. And so we miss Lou very dearly, and this is sort of a celebration. I just did a Zoom hang yesterday with the Mingus Big Band trumpeters, and they were doing the same thing, playing Lou Soloff solos, and we were all talking about how much we love Lou.
Well, thank you for
Yeah.
sharing that. And one of the other reasons why I wanted to have some time with you is because, as you can see in behind me, that's my record collection. And so, because of COVID-19, I'm spending more time. I told this to Bobby earlier. I'm spending more time in the studio, and I'm going album by album in ways I hadn't in many years. And one of the
Mm,
albums I took a deeper dive as far as looking at was this one here, Echando Palante. And what
mm,
struck me was that the person who writes the liner notes is your mother.
yeah,
She
yes.
wrote the liner notes. And then I find out she was a musician as well. I think she was in classical music, correct? What was
Not
what was
really.
her or she was a
She's a
composer. What was she?
composer. She's a composer and a lyricist in many styles, some classical, but mostly in pop music. She's done some Latin. She wrote a few songs for Larry Harlow's Latin Fever band.
Mm.
Um, yeah, and I'm so happy you pointed that out because I think my mom's probably watching right now,
I hope she
and
is.
she she did do the liner notes for that album, and they're really terrific. And she was a keen observer of the whole phenomenon that was Eddie Palmieri meeting Barry Rogers and sort of the beginning of the La Perfecta band, and she was there for the whole thing. You know.
So tell me about Lou Soloff's role in your mother and father getting together. Did he play a role? Did he have something to do with that?
Yeah, so it's funny. There are two famous musicians that claim to have introduced my parents to each other before I was born, obviously. One is Lou Soloff and one is Bobby Purcelli. So I don't know which one it was, but some combination of the two of them, they were both independently friends with my mom, Lou, and my dad, Barry. And I'm presuming this was around 1959 or maybe 1960 in the Catskill Mountains when you had Palmieri's band was there and you had um, Jewish and Italian clientele, and you had American bands, and it was all, this amazing synthesis. And somehow or another, Lou or Bobby Purcelli got the idea to introduce my parents to each other, and that's what happened. And here I
You're
am.
the product of that. And then before we go to the track which you and I spoke of, in which you perform a trumpet solo along with Hilton Reese playing piano,
Yeah.
um, I read an article that you wrote, and there's there's a mention of a moment when you were young where you met Ron Carter Jr. Can you share that anecdote with us about how that went? Quiero que la gente, especialmente los músicos, miren, melómanos que están escuchando el show, que están viendo el show. El hijo de Barry Rogers, invitado especial y de sorpresa, nuestro invitado especial es Bobby Sanabria, que estará con nosotros ya en un minuto, pero invité a Chris por el solo que escucharon de Lou Soloff en la trompeta y el hecho de que Lou Soloff fue el mentor de Chris Rogers, el hijo de Barry Rogers, el gran trombonista de La Perfecta. Así que estamos charlando un poco sobre eso, entonces vamos a escuchar una selección musical en la cual el solo es de Chris y el piano es Hilton Reese con Bongo Santa María y Bobby en la batería. So Chris, tell us quickly about that anecdote about you meeting Ron Carter Jr.
Yeah, that's really nice that you asked me that story, Jose. Well, I started my trumpet playing career as a student, going to the Manhattan School of Music on Saturday mornings, the preparatory division. And when I started it, I had never even touched a trumpet, but whatever. Lou Soloff gave me a horn, and I started taking lessons. And then, I guess by the time I was about 11 or 12 years old, I met a kid in my theory class. His name was Ron. That's all I knew. His name was Ron. And he had a trumpet case just like me. We're like 11 years, 12 years old. And we ended up meeting in the library at the Manhattan School of Music, which was a record library. And we took that album, Blood, Sweat, and Tears, featuring Lou Soloff's spinning wheel solo, and we put it on, and we're all listening. And then I said to my friend Ron, I said, "Hey, Lou Soloff gave me my trumpet." And then Ron says, "Oh yeah, well Miles Davis gave me my trumpet." And then we started talking, and I find out, well, his name was Ron Carter Jr., Ron Carter's son. And it was crazy because my dad, Barry Rogers, had just played trombone on Ron Carter's CTI album called Anything Goes. So I told Ron, "Hey, my dad's on your dad's album," And so we sort of bonded over that. I had Lou's trumpet and he had Miles's trumpet, and our dads recorded together. And yeah, and we eventually went to high school together. And Ron Carter Jr. became a bass player. I think he lives in Boston. Maybe you know him there. But yeah,
Well,
that's the little story, and
that's
we
a little
bonded
story.
over Lou Soloff's spinning wheels. So
There you go.
yeah,
So let's listen to the track from this album, which the band, Bobby just sent me some private chat here where he hadn't heard this in many years. And Bobby was like, wow, I forgot how great this music sounded. And so the band was Mongo on congas, Sam Furness, flute, soprano, alto, baritone sax, Tony Henson on tenor and flute, Chris Rogers on trumpet, Bobby Cuarenta on piano, Sal Cuevas was that bass player. When you hear that bass right away, you know that's Sal.
oh,
And then
it's Sal.
yeah,
Yeah.
you know it's Sal. And then Bobby Sanabria, timbales, drums, and percussion. And then Lou on trumpet on Bonita and Freedom. And Hilton Reese is the pianist on this particular cut, Piranha, which features you on pianos, on trumpet. So let's hear this. And then I'm going to bring Bobby on so we can make this conversation go to the next level of richness. ¿Ok? Vamos a escuchar ahora Mongo Santa María, la canción que viene del disco titulado Mongo Magic y se titula Piraña con Hilton Reese en el piano y escuchen el solo de trompeta de Chris Rogers. Aquí en el programa con salsa. El nombre mío es José Mazo hasta las 6, más o menos, quizá más, porque tenemos a Boy Sanabria y tenemos mucho de qué hablar. Y estaremos celebrando lo mejor de nuestra música afroantillana con un toque de jazz y jazz latino para que de esa manera podamos ampliar el conocimiento que tenemos sobre la riqueza de nuestra cultura afroantillana. So let's go to that cut. Don't go away. Stay right there. That was what I would say. I've got to bring Bobby in here because he was behind all of that great music. And Bobby, what a
Chris, what's
way
up?
to welcome you to the show, Bobby Sanabria. Wow. That's the only thing I can say. Bobby, first and foremost, thank you for taking time to join me this afternoon. As I mentioned, I was going to have Chris join us for a few minutes so that way he can sort of access the stage. And at the same time, hearing that music, which, same to you, I've been hearing this album all week long, and I find so many gems in the music that I'm just like, wow, this is it. This is what music's all about. But first and foremost, Bobby Sanabria, welcome to Con Salsa.
Thank you so much. And first and foremost, before I say hi to my brother Chris, I have to wish you a happy birthday. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, Jose y con salsa. Happy birthday to you. Oye, man. Happy
con,
birthday.
con clave. Y ahora viene la trompeta. O sea, eso fue con clave.
I wanted
Felicidades
to
con
I
salsa,
wanted to
45
join
años
you,
y
but I
José
don't
Mazo
my mouth.
70. You'll get there. But anyway, gracias,
And,
Bobby.
and
Gracias.
I and I want to say hello to my brother Chris. It was a nice surprise when you told me off mic that he was going to be on. We don't really get to see much of each other, but as I said in the private chat, I'm going to read exactly what I wrote. Man, Jose, I haven't heard those cuts in years. I'm glad they still sound great.
They
So
do.
and
They're
Chris
classic.
sounded great, and as Chris could tell you, we did that old school. Everybody was in the studio live. Marty Scheller was the producer, great producer. I learned a lot from him. And I got the opportunity on that recording not only to play drums and timbales, but I also got to play shekere, guiro, etc. Mongo didn't know I had didn't know I had those talents because they were going to get somebody else to do it, an extra percussion. And I said, no, I could do the guiro, and all that stuff. It's no big thing. And it was really nice because while I was doing that, my then wife Evita had come to that one of the sessions, and she goes to me, you know what Marty and Mongo was saying about you while you were overdubbing the guiro and the shakers. He goes, man, this guy is really professional. So I'm so glad he's in the band, So, and I'm so glad that we didn't get to we got to spend a year together, me and Chris. It was great having him in the band. Of course, Buddy Rich calls, and how are you going to turn down an opportunity to play with another legend like that? But I didn't know, Chris, that you only had played with him for 5 weeks. But that must have been the most intense 5 weeks of your life, So
It must have been. So
I mean, how was it playing with how was it playing with Buddy? I mean, in terms of just being in the
Well, it was funny playing with Buddy because at the first rehearsal he thought my name was Steve, and there was 3 rookies at the first rehearsal, and you're not supposed to talk back to Buddy, and I'm standing right next to him, and every time he called me Steve, I had to correct him, and everyone was like, oh man, the rookie's talking back. I was only 21 years old. So he would say Steve on trumpet. I would say Chris. And that happened 3 times. So for the whole 5 weeks I was in his band, he called me Steve Chris. He would call me Steve Chris. He'd introduce me to the audience. Steve Chris on the trumpet. But you know what? Buddy was cool, and I got to stand right next to him, and he was fine when I was there, and it was an amazing experience. Really great, but that was a short experience. I would have stayed with Mongo for a long time, And by the way, let's give credit. I know you mentioned Marty Scheller produced, but that song Piranha, I believe, is also Marty's management. Great Marty Scheller.
Yep.
Right. Marty, we did several, the majority of the arrangements, not all of them, but the majority of them were by Marty. That song Piranha. What's interesting about that song, that's one of the first recorded examples of songo, which is a then modern style of music, of approaching Cuban dance music that Los Van Van had created in 1968, 1969 in Cuba. So I was fortunate that I'm one of the first documented drummers in stateside, other than Cubans, to have recorded that style of rhythm on a recording. Mongo on it at that fast tempo, he was playing a combination of mambo and then on some sections Mozambique.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as what I was playing was basically mambo, and then during Mongo solo, I was playing songo there.
Mm.
So I mean, I'm proud of that, and I'm proud that man, both me and Chris, we were there. You know, we were very young in our early 20s, and just playing with Mongo was great. I have a funny anecdote about that session. Maybe Chris remembers it. Jack Hook, who was managing Mongo and very famous figure in terms of the history of jazz and the history of
Mm-hmm.
Latin music from behind the
Mm-hmm.
scenes. He was managing Mongo. He had managed Mongo before. Their relationship had gone way back to the '60s. And anyway, he goes to us. The album was recorded on Roulette Records,
Right.
which was owned by Morris Levy, the
Mm-hmm.
notorious Morris Levy,
Mm-hmm.
who has had the unique distinction of having ripped off everybody in every style of music that you could name, from jazz to Latin to classical music to doo-wop, pop, rock, etc., and hip hop. He put the money up for the Sugar Hill Gang to record.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So Jack had facilitated that recording to happen. Mongo needed a new album out so he could be, still relevant in terms of the music scene. So Jack made a call to Moish, as he was called.
Mm-hmm.
He facilitated paying for the session, this, that, and then all of a sudden Jack goes to us at the end of one of the sessions. I think we did it in 2 days. He goes, "How do you guys want to get paid?" And then I think Sam Furnace goes, "What do you mean, how do we want to get paid?" He goes, "What do you want? You want this to go through the musicians union or you want it to go cash?" And then nobody said anything. And I said, being the activist that I am, I said, the musicians union. And Tony Henson, some of the other guys, "But why?" And he goes, "Because the session is on record. We get health benefits and everything. There's a record of our wages, et cetera, et cetera." And, everybody kind of said, agreed with me. And Jack said some expletive deleted, and he said something like, Sanabria, God, you're going to be trouble, whatever. So, but
Good
that's one
trouble.
of the
Good
nice
trouble.
things that happened on that
Good,
session.
good trouble. That's good trouble.
Yeah,
Anyway,
good
Chris,
trouble.
good
Thank
trouble.
you.
I
Chris, I want to
remember
thank you
that.
I want to thank you, Chris, for taking time to join us.
I don't
I
remember. I was
appreciate it.
probably
We're gonna
off in some corner trying to warm up my trumpet.
Well, we'll do it next time. And I'm looking forward to another conversation we can have with you and get deep into everything about not only your life as a musician, but also, obviously your father's legacy. We spoke about the last time we saw each other. That's where it was, Scullers, a couple of years ago with Sammy Figueroa here in at the
Yeah,
Guest Quarters Hotel. That's
yeah.
you. And I remember that day very well. But I appreciate you being here. And here's one more from memory. There you are with Eddie Palmieri and Eddie Palmieri the second.
Ah,
Uh, and I guess that's somewhere in Europe that you're touring, but it looks good. It looks good. But anyway, my friend,
yeah.
thank you
That
for
that
joining
was
us,
in the
Chris.
airport, and tired, and Eddie Jr. and I looked pretty tired in that picture, but actual Eddie, this is in the airport, like we had no sleep. But look at Eddie; he's always like that. He's got so much energy. He looks
It's
great in that photo. Yeah, that was like 2016 or something, I think.
yeah,
That's
it
when we
was.
went to Mexico City with Palmieri.
All right.
I
Yeah,
must say about Chris, Chris has a unique pedagogy. I believe you're on one of the Jerry Mulligan albums, right? You're right, Chris? Because you played with Jerry Mulligan's band as well, right? Did you hear what I said?
yeah.
You
I was with Jerry Mulligan from 1981 to 1985. The only record that we made was live at Carnegie Hall, the great concert. That's when it was Mel Torme and George Shearing and Jerry Mulligan, and we were sort of the backup band, so we didn't really have solos on that. But it was live at Carnegie Hall, and it was eventually released. The union fought really hard to get us paid. It was released like 20 years after we recorded.
Oh, wow.
Um, yeah, unfortunately, I didn't get any other chance to record with Jerry. But yeah, 5 years with Jerry Mulligan. That's literally and figuratively how I cut my teeth as a trumpeter. That was an amazing experience, and that was thanks to Tom Harrell, who I basically replaced and played his chair in the band.
Great, great.
Yeah,
Wow.
I mean, this is
I,
way back. That's when I was like 19, and played with Mongo when I was 21. So these were very amazing experiences in my life, and I hold them very dear to my heart.
Yeah, formative years, formative years. But again, I thank you. I chat to you. Stay safe, my brother. And we're going to be in touch because we're going to do this again, Chris. So thank you so much. Appreciate you.
Thanks,
Take
Jose.
care.
Chris,
Be
love you
well.
madly.
Thanks, Jose, for having me. Thanks, Bobby. I love you, man.
Be well.
Same here, brother.
Bye bye. Wow, that's great. So, Bobby Sanabria, saludos de nuevo y gracias por esa anécdota sobre grabar con Mongo Santa María. Y tú, como joven, ¿qué edad tú tenías? Porque cuando terminaste en Berkeley, let me see, I met you in 1975. So you were what in 75? You were
18
20,
years old. I was 18 years old.
18 years old.
You know what I
Yeah.
looked like back then? Let me show you. My son last night gave me this picture. This is my freshman year at Berkeley.
That's you. I remember it well. Yeah, that's Mr. Sanabria. We should tell people how it was we met because that is a story in itself. El hecho de que ese joven que ustedes vieron ahí con pelo largo, con la melena larga, con bigote, Bobby Sanabria a la edad de 18 años, cuando primero llegó a Boston para estudiar en Berklee College of Music. Y ese saludos, mira, tenemos saludos desde Costa Rica, pura vida a ustedes también, gracias, se le agradece. Mary Kent said hello to you as well.
Oh, Mary,
Mary's going to be one of our guests. She'll be joining me.
tremendous
Probably
photographer. Tremendous.
yes, she'll be joining me in the beginning of September. Tomorrow we've got Martin Cohen, which you wrote the prologue, the forward to his book Conga Head. And so I just wanted to say to folks, so back in 1975, when we started the program Con Salsa, June 22nd and here's the book that we're speaking of, Salsa Talks, in which Mary Kent is responsible for that, and she'll be our guest at the beginning of September. But when we met, it was because soon after I started the program and you came up to Boston, there was an opportunity for one of our greatest idols to perform and for us to be there. And it was none other than this gentleman, Tito Puente and his Latin band. Look at the price of admission back then, Bobby. $3.
Yep.
$3, of which, of course, we enjoyed being there. And that's how you and I met. But what I remember most about that occasion, well, I remember a lot of things, but one of the things I remember was that you as a young man walk up to Tito and ask to sit in on drums. Mikey Goyaso, the
No,
legendary
no.
drummer.
I asked him to sit in on timbales.
Oh, that's the way it was. Yeah, that's right. Timbales was started.
It's funny because I had heard about through your show.
Uh-huh.
And believe me, this is amazing to me. I didn't know that was the first year of your show. I thought your show had existed already. But being the way I am, when I was at Berkeley, my freshman year, I was the only Puerto Rican there. I'm serious. I looked everywhere, and I just saw a gentleman, Carlos, that he mandó un saludo desde Costa Rica.
Sí, Carlos Alberto Millán
Pura vida,
Ocampo.
Carlos, gracias. The way I got to Berkeley was in high school, at Cardinal Hayes High School in the South Bronx, in the marching band and in the concert band. The only two people that were interested in being professional musicians was myself and this Costarricense gentleman of Costa Rica descent, David Carmona. Tremendous, talented guy. I used to, every once in a while, I'd walk in early to band class to practice on the snare drum or the timpani or whatever. And David is there looking at a catalog that says Berklee College of Music. He's looking at it. He's the only guy there because we would be the only guys that were interested in really practicing. So I go, what is that? He goes, oh man, this is the school that Quincy Jones went to and Chick Corea. And I go, really? So he goes, yeah. So I start flipping, and there's a picture of a rehearsal. All the pictures were in black and white in the catalog. There's a picture of a rehearsal of a band, and they have a conga player, but the guy's head you can't see his face. But in the rehearsal, I didn't know it at the time, but later on in the rehearsal, the conga player was Don Elias. The tenor saxophone was Dick Taco Mesa. Wow. It was amazing. Wow. Ed Byrne was the trombone player, all of these great people. And I go to David, wow, do you think they teach Latin percussion there too or whatever? He goes, they must. They got that picture of the conga. Of course, they didn't. But anyway, that's how both of us, we practiced to audition for the school. And I remember Mr. Ryan, my high school band director, goes to me, hey, Sanabria, you and Carmona, you're really serious about this. Oh yeah, Mr. Ryan, you know, we're already gigging and playing around town. And he goes, listen, you'll never pass the audition. I go, what are you talking about? You don't know anything about scales or anything like that. Or, you know what, do you know what the Dorian mode is? And I go, no, I never, I know about Picture of a Dorian Gray, that movie, He started laughing. He goes, listen, I'll make a deal with you. Stay out of trouble. Since it was a Catholic school, they had detention if you got caught doing anything nefarious. We had a thing called judgment under God, where if you got caught cheating on a test or something, whatever infraction, showing up late, you had to stay in school for an hour after school and stand silently, like in the military, and not do anything. Eventually, they put it so you just sit down. So he goes, if you stay out of jug, I'll give you free theory lessons Monday, Wednesday, and Friday afternoon. So we would assiduously come, and he'd give us a private lesson on theory.
Wow.
And that's how we were able to pass the auditions and get into the school. I mean, it was just amazing. And I always thank Mr. Ryan. I always mention him when I can in interviews, because there was 3 people that changed my life. My father, Jose, may he rest in peace, from Guánica, Puerto Rico, la gran ciudad de Guánica. Well, 4 people really. Him, my mother, because my mother was the one that told at that time, I think it's still the same thing. If you're less than 18 years old, you have to have written permission from your parents to leave New York City to go to college. So my father was telling me, oye, pero tú debes pensarlo bien, te puedes quedar aquí en Nueva York, you can stay here in New York, study, you need to study something else so you can fall back on, because music is a precarious profession, this and that. My mother's with her arms like this, looking at him.
Se puso brava.
She goes to him, I'm going to quote her exactly, mira, si tú no firmas los papeles para él ir a la universidad, te voy a divorciar. If you don't sign the papers for him to go to college in Boston, I'm going to divorce you.
The ultimatum. Oh my
God.
Yeah.
So she understood my dream, and the fact that growing up in the South Bronx, where I was growing up during the heart of during that time period when the Bronx was burning, it was horrible. So that was my way out, both professionally and life-changing wise. So Mr. Ryan and Keith Copeland at the Berklee College of Music. He made me the drummer that I am today. May he rest in peace. And it so happens that Keith's father, Ray Copeland, played on many recordings with Tito Puente as a lead trumpeter in the 1950s. So those people, helped me so much. My father, in terms of, he exposed me to music outside of the canon of just Latin music. He was into Machito Puente, Tito Rodriguez, and all that good stuff. But he exposed me to Count Basie. He exposed me to Duke Ellington. He exposed me to Lola Flores from Spain. He exposed me to the Jíbaro music tradition from La Montaña, from the mountains of Puerto Rico. He exposed me to Brazilian music. So I have my father to thank for that. But Berklee, that was David Carmona. That's how I got to Berklee, because of him. And he was from Costa Rica. His parents were from Costa Rica. He grew up in New York City. He grew up right near the Manhattan School of Music. And let me tell you an interesting anecdote. He goes to me one day, hey, Bobby, I live right near a music school. I go, yeah, what's that? The Manhattan School of Music. Oh, wow. Why don't we go? He goes, why don't we go over there one day and just visit the school and just walk around? So we're like 16, 17, we're like, we're kids, 15, 16. So it's interesting where David grew up, because he grew up right near the building that George Carlin, the famous comedian, grew up on. So anyway, I meet him. I take the subway. We go there on a Friday afternoon, I believe it was. And what happens? The security guard stops us. And he goes, what do you kids want? I goes, well, we're young musicians, we just want to see the school and we're interested, etc. He goes, you go here for the prep program, which is what Chris was talking about, the preparatory program for high school students that is on Saturdays. He goes, no, he goes, no, well, you can't come in here. And I said, yeah, but, we're really, excited. I'm trying to convince the guy. David is trying to convince the guy. He goes, I'm sorry, but you got to leave. You can't come in here. What happens? I wind up teaching at the Manhattan School of
That's
Music later
life
on,
is
20
always
years.
like that. That's the way life is.
Yeah.
That's the way
But
life is. That's the
the
life is.
way, but getting back to the Harbor House with Tito Puente, I don't know how many trains and trolleys I took to get out there. No, nobody at the school wanted to go with me because first of all, they didn't know who Tito Puente was.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't mean anything to them.
Mm-hmm.
And then they weren't even interested, which is something we could talk about later about the indifference that many people have toward our culture and our music,
Mm-hmm.
especially in the jazz community. So I went by myself. And I got there and I was, I go, wow. And then I could tell it was getting toward the end. And I just said, man, it's either now or never. And I went up there. I go, hello, Mr. Puente. He goes, Maestro. He goes, can I sit in? And he goes to me, you want to sit in? Sure, kid, sure. He goes, what do you play? And I go, timbales. And he goes, timbales. And he goes to the rest of the band. Hey, guess what, guys? This guy plays timbales. And I remember Bobby Porcelli was in the band.
Mm-hmm.
And all these guys, they all started, and they went all of them at the same time, like a cue. They went, timbales, wow, like a comedy routine. So he goes, all right, kid, come on up, if you're brave enough to, and we started playing a descarga, which is, mambo on 2 chords. And I went like this to him, raised 4 fingers up, which means for us in jazz, 4s. You take 4 bars,
Mm-hmm.
he takes 4 bars and he nods, and we started trading. And then after we finished, the crowd went basically ballistic.
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't believe that I had done that, but I did it. And then, I met you. You came up to me and we started talking, and you gave me a lift home. Thank God you gave me a lift home, because I think the trolleys ended at 2 o'clock in the morning.
It was past the trolley time, but you were fantastic, and that started our friendship. Edgar Nevares, saludos a ti también, mi hermano, y gracias por el saludito para mi cumpleaños. Another graduate of Berklee College of Music. Antes de continuar, tengo una pieza aquí musical que quiero que vean y que oigan. Y es una pieza que fue grabada por Luis Perico Ortiz en quizás su segundo disco, tercer disco. Pero de cualquier manera, mira, también te manda saludos David Rosado, Cuba. Saluditos, David. Qué alegría verte.
Un boricua con ese nombre, con ese apellido, Cuba. Tienes suerte, mi hermano.
De cualquier manera, Perico había grabado el disco y lo grabó, yo creo que en el segundo o tercer disco de larga duración con su agrupación. Y luego graba el disco de nuevo, o la canción que se titula Todos quieren saber cómo vivo yo. Pero en esta ocasión te tiene a ti tocando batería, no solamente timbales. Y quiero que la gente oiga un poco de esta pieza musical. I'm going to share this cut with you. It's Luis Perico Ortiz, and it's from this album here. So all you melómanos, todos ustedes que saben la fecha y cuándo fue grabada, etcétera, el disco de Luis Perico Ortiz se titula Breaking the Rules. Escuchemos, todos quieren saber cómo vivo yo. En el piano, Oscar Hernández, Luis Perico Ortiz, trompeta, Domingo Quiñones en las vocales, Barry Danilian, trompeta, John Farnsworth, trombón, Tim Newman, trombón, en el bajo, Pucho Matos, sintetizador, David Velocio, timbales, Nelson Díaz, En el bongo, Carlito Soto. Congas, Roberto Carrero. Y en la batería, Bobby Sanabria. El sonido del snare. I love that snare back there.
I wish I still had it.
But the sound, I mean, it was just a full sound when I heard this recording with you playing drums.
Yeah, well, that was Perico's concept. You know, the thing is that a lot of the things that that eventually were done in Cuba later on, like using two keyboards, like in this case, a synthesizer player, a pianist, using the drum set like that. Or although it had been used in, listen, the drum set in Latin music, especially in Afro-Cuban based music, is nothing new. It goes back to the invention of the drum set in the 20s and 30s, etc. And I could cite chapter and verse many great drummers, especially Puerto Rican drum set players, going way back to the time of Javier Cugat, etc. But in this case, Perico wanted me to add like a rock flavor to the things. And it was I was kind of strange because I used to tell him, déjame tocar todo este conocimiento que yo tengo de los ritmos cubanos, etcétera, adaptado a la batería. Déjame tocar all this knowledge that I have of playing Afro-Cuban rhythms on the drum set, like playing pilón, paca, songo, all of these rhythms. He said, no, I don't want you to do that. So for me, it was difficult because I had to be very, very disciplined. And then I used to every once in a while bug him. Oye, Perico, déjame tocar esto. And he goes, no, don't do that. So finally, on this tune, he goes, mira, va a haber un punto donde tú coges un solo, puedes hacer lo que quieras ahí. There'll be a point in the tune where you can do whatever you want. So that you get to hear it in a second.
Yeah. How was it you joined Luis Perico Ortiz? How did that come about?
He called me. He had heard about me. I had left Mongo's band, and I was doing off-Broadway theater music. Not only was I playing in theaters, but I was also composing music for off-Broadway. So he goes, where can I come see you play? And I go to him, well, come to Intar. I'm doing this show, this off-Broadway show. And he came to see me. He was in the audience.
Wow.
And because that's how I got in the band. Same thing how I got into Mario Balzar's band. He came to see me play, which is another story.
Well, we're going to talk about that.
Mongo's gig I got because a couple of people that he had met in Boston, like Lenny Bradford and others, had told him. Lenny was a fellow student with me in Boston on bass. He had told Mongo about me, and others had kept mentioning my name. And he had called me, and this is a good lesson for everybody. Jack Hook calls me up.
Hold on a second.
Yeah.
Tremendo solo.
Gracias.
Tremendo solo.
There was more to it there, but I encourage everybody to get that album.
More,
y quiero saludar a Eggy Trio que está mirando ahora.
Sí, Eggy,
David Rosado Cuba, otro hermano de tambor que me saludó en la pantalla. all of these great percussionists from Puerto Rico, keeping the tradition of Afro Caribbean music, Afro Cuban music, Afro Puerto Rican music, Afro Dominican music, all the musics that we
Afro-antillana, la
represent
música
in Latin
latina.
America, but
Yeah,
through the Puerto Rican experience.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, but anyway, so una anécdota in terms of Mongo getting the gig with Mongo.
Mm-hmm.
So what happened was Jack Hook calls me, his manager, and he goes, "Listen, we're leaving in 2 days to go to Europe. You got your passport, right?" And I go, "Oh my God, you know." In those days, you could go down to the passport office in New York and get a passport in 1 day in an emergency.
Yeah.
I said, and I was honest. I should have told him no. I should have told him, yes, I do have my passport, but I was honest. I said, no, but don't worry, I can get it. He goes, well, I don't know. So, anyway, call me back. So I went down, stated my case. I got the passport. I called him up the next day, and he said, I'm sorry, Mongo got nervous, and I got nervous, but don't worry, we'll call you back, So I go, oh my God, man, I blew the gig. They were going to Europe. Anyway, they called me back about 6 months later, and it all worked out. It all worked out for the better. So all you young musicians out there, make sure you get your passport.
So this one, of course, is a classic.
Oh, that was Mario Baltar. I remember that well, yeah.
Mario Bauzat.
Yeah, the father of Afro-Cuban jazz. And Afro-Cuban jazz was born in New York City, not in Cuba, with the Machito Afro-Cubans in 1939. Every jazz history book says Dizzy Gillespie invented it, but even Dizzy used to say, I didn't invent anything. It was Mario Balzar and the Machito Afro-Cubans. At the Park Palace Ballroom on East 110th Street and 5th Avenue in New York City in 1939. If you go to the statue of Duke Ellington at 110th Street and 5th Avenue, stand in front of it, look to the right, you'll see what's now a Pentecostal church. But that used to be the Golden Casino, and then the Park Palace was on the second floor of the ballroom. That's where Afro-Cuban jazz, the first form of Latin jazz, was born. So algo que we created here in New York City in a band made up of Cubans and Puerto Ricanos and African Americans at first, and then Jews and Italians came in later, et cetera, et cetera. But that's where it was born, New York City, in El Barrio.
So you play with Luis Perico Ortiz, you play with Mongo Sanabria, you play with a whole bunch of people, and now Mario brings you into the fold. He brings you in to play with a group which is, iconic, right? Machito and his Afro-Cubans, but Mario Bauzat himself, whatever he puts together is going to be iconic as well. And you record 3 albums, of which when you hear them, you say, they're still so fresh. The arrangements, everything about that. Tiene un saludo aquí de parte de Eduardo Livia que dice, saludo para ti desde Lima, Perú. Tuve la oportunidad de entrevistarte hace años y también entrevistó al legendario Cándido Camero. Ah, qué bien. Y el teléfono de la gran Graciela. Ay, bendito, no pudo hablar con él. Bueno, intentó por lo menos, intentó. Aquí el distinguido Eddie Catrillo, este tema suena al tema Caribe de Santos.
That's it.
Algo parecido.
That's it.
Yeah,
that's it. That's the tune. It's a blues. It's a blues, the 12-bar blues. Yeah.
Yeah.
Gracias, Eduardo. Thank you so much. And y a todo el mundo, I feel to salute everybody, darle saludos a todo el mundo. Gracias por estando en sintonía aquí con Salsa. Thanks for everybody tuning in. Talking about Graciela, here's a nice picture.
Let's see that. Wait a minute. Nice. Yeah. Yeah. I
There's
can see it.
Gracie right there,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
right there.
There she is.
And
Yeah.
that was at some private affair. I was playing with Ascension, my group. Oscar Hernandez in the back there is playing piano. That's Iram Ramon El Pavo from Colombia, incredible singer and percussionist. And there's the La Única Gracie. We did an impromptu version of I Jose there. There's video of me playing with the Tito Puente Orchestra. Somebody found it. This gentleman, Quint Hooper from Chile, was a DJ
Mhm.
and a radio announcer. He found videos. I didn't even know. In 1994, we did a concert with the Puente Orchestra. I was playing with the Puente Orchestra drums at the Apollo in tribute to Mario, who had just died in 93. It was a tribute to Gracie, Graciela, Mario, and Dizzy that Joe Conzo put together, and some other people, some other producers. So there was a point in the concert where Gracie comes out, and then Tito turns around to me. He goes, Bobby, come down. I go, come down for what? Toca timbal, you know? And I go, okay, you know. So I go there. It was because he had to do a costume change.
Oh, okay.
So you see me playing there. This video of it. In fact, if you scroll down my Facebook page, you'll get to see it. But I didn't even know the video existed. But it's amazing. And Jose Madera was there, but Tito told him to conduct the band. He wanted me to play with Gracie because of our relationship with the Mario Balza Orchestra, Afro-Cuban Jazz Orchestra.
Mm-hmm.
And Gracie, I must say, for those of you who don't know, this is Gracie Graciela Perez, Mario Balza's sister-in-law. A lot of people don't realize how important she is to the music. Everybody talks about Celia Cruz,
Mm-hmm.
and then you talk about La Lupe, but you have to talk about Graciela because she used to be a bass player. She played with the all-female band Anacaona. They toured Paris, France, back in the 30s. I mean, I believe it was in the early 30s. They toured France. She's so important to the history of the music. And for the musicians in the band that she dug, all of a sudden you get a phone call. Sanabria. I go, maestra, ¿qué pasa? Mira, ¿qué estás haciendo ahora? Bueno, me acabo de levantar. You know, it's like 12 o'clock. What are you doing now? I go, she calls you up. I just woke up. I had a gig last night. Well, are you hungry? And I go, well, yeah, well, get dressed. Come down here. I just made some bacalao and this, that. So you show up at our apartment in Manhattan, and there besides yourself, me might be Joe Gonzalez, the bongo player, Marcus Pichon, the piano, and we're there talking, and she treated us like her children, her respected sons, and I'll always be grateful for that relationship that I had with her, not just being on the bandstand. And she was tough, man. She was tough because as you well know, it's a man's world out there in the music industry, and in Latin music, forget it because of our machismo, and she could curse you out in a New York minute if she wanted to. So I saw her do it in rehearsals to Mario, and I'm going, whoa, you know, this woman is fierce as she should be. So she's we're talking about civil rights now because of John Lewis and everything. Mario, Machito, all those guys in that band, Graciela, they were all champions for civil rights, because who in their right mind in 1939 would call a band in New York City Machito and the Afro-Cubans? They put their blackness out there in full force. Nobody in the African-American community was doing that. Nobody. All of a sudden, these guys, not only are they forcing the African-American community to confront their blackness and their roots in Africa, but we as Latinos in New York City, you know, because I always say, it's not about culture. I'm sorry, it's not about color. It's about culture. Mm-hmm. That's why in Cuba, you go to Cuba and you'll see a guy with blonde hair and green eyes, y más blanco que yo, more whiter than me, and all of a sudden he's thrown down on the quinto, on the rumba. Or a Chinese Cubano doing the same thing, and you go, and people go, how could they do that? And I go, because that's their culture. Mm-hmm. They're Cuban. It's not about the color, it's about the culture. Mm-hmm. You know, so.
Mm-hmm. Eggy Catrillo dice, eso es verdad, eso es cierto, eso es cierto. La cultura. Hablando de cultura, aquí Melissa de Florida dice, love the Cita Rodriguez tribute to Graciela, que es otra manera de mantener vivo el nombre de alguien como Graciela. Aquí Ceci Johnny desde California, saluditos para ti.
Gracias.
Así que el saludo va de parte de ellos. Bobby, yo he intentado durante el momento de COVID-19, pensar de qué manera podemos nosotros en este momento realzar nuestra música, aunque siempre lo hacemos, ¿no? Cada uno de nosotros, o sea, en la radio, o sea, como músicos, etcétera, etcétera. Pero yo pienso que ahora tenemos un momento bien importante donde podemos aprovechar para aquellos que estén ansiosos, no ansiosos, con hambre de aprender. Por ejemplo, yo veo el nombre de Eggy y yo veo el nombre de David Rosado Cuba y los otros que están compartiendo su conocimiento por medio de la tecnología cada semana. Tú también lo haces. You do the same thing. You have discussion percussion, where you've invited some great percussionists to spend some time with you to have deep conversation about this. And the reason I say that is because there is a TV special movie slash Palladium, the Mambo, the home of the Mambo, in which you played such an important role of bringing that history to all of us, number one. And then, of course, we have this one, which
Oh,
is
that music you say, yeah.
Latin Music USA. And I remember when it aired for the first time, you came to Boston and played with your band here at WGBH, and I was there with you. And Davina sends her regards, by the way. But you played a role in this as well. And I say to people, look, when you think of Bobby Sanabria, you think of him as a musician. You think of him as an educator at Manhattan, School of Music. But you have to think of him as an activist, a cultural warrior, and a historian. Because for you, like many others, our history is important. So let's talk a little bit about that. Because Bobby's asking the question here, if you can talk a little bit about Mambo USA tour. And put that in context of history. Vamos a hablar un poco de
Well,
historia.
the Mambo USA tour was at the height of the Mambo, I believe, in 1955. Producers in New York, they wanted to capitalize on that. You have to realize that at that time, what was the number one rated show in the United States on TV at that time? The I Love Lucy show. A Cuban was the protagonist. He was also the producer of the show with his wife, Lucille Ball. People looked at us as exotic. Cuban music was definitely at its high point in terms of its mainstream appeal to U.S. audiences. And so they wanted to capitalize on that. And they put together this big tour with Machito and guest stars like Candido. And of course, in Machito's band is Graciela, Mario Balzaz, the musical director, and many others. I believe Tito Puente was involved as well. I have a copy of the poster somewhere around here, but in any way, a reproduction of it. It was an amazing thing. It was going to tour the United States. Mongo Santa Maria was part of it, the whole thing. They play in New York City first. They start off in Brooklyn. It's a big hit. Why not? New York City is the capital of Afro-Cuban based music,
Right.
or what we call salsa today. But I always say, when people ask me what is salsa, I says salsa is Cuban music played with a freaking Puerto Rican attitude. Always, I always say that.
We're going to hear something like that soon. I've got New
Right.
Rican songs, so we'll talk
Yeah.
about that.
So anyway, then they get to Baltimore, which is the dividing. Once you get past Baltimore, where are you?
Mason
in the
Dixon is
South.
starting to go south. Yeah, there you go.
What happens? They they have a rehearsal, and all of a sudden the police show up, and they start saying things like, "What are all these N-words doing here?" Et cetera, and the tour basically had to be canceled. You're talking about over an entourage of close to 30 people, even more, traveling. They're spreading the gospel of multiculturalism, but the United States wasn't ready for it at that time. They could take a Cuban on TV playing the part of the buffoon, but Desi Arnaz, you have to respect him, because even though he was the butt of jokes, et cetera, he's the band leader in the club. He owns the club. And not only that, he has the balls on national TV at that time to sing a song for Babalu Ayer, the deity of pestilence, the Orisha of pestilence, of sickness, in what we call Santeria today, which is rooted in Ifa from Nigeria with the Yoruba people in Africa. Of course, mainstream America is like looking at the song as just a novelty song. Oh,
Right.
Babalu. But for we in the know that were Latino at the time, especially New Yorkers, Cubans and Puerto Ricanos, we're going, oye, este tipo está cantando una canción a un orisha.
Uh-huh.
Holy sheesh. How is he doing that, man? Or whatever. And he's doing it good too.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
so of course Miguelito Valdez had done that already in
Right.
1939 or
Right.
38. But you know, the thing is that the perception of Latinos back then, we were exoticized.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden, the incredible migration of Puerto Ricanos to New York City that comes to a height in the 1950s, that had already started way, way back.
Mm-hmm.
You're going back to 1929. No, sorry, 1928, September 13, 1928, when Hurricane San Felipe hits Puerto Rico and devastates the island. And then the next year is the stock market crash. So Puerto Ricanos start coming in mass to New York City. And there were Puerto Ricanos before then,
Mm-hmm.
but this really jumpstarts it, the mass migration. So all of a sudden, what happens? We are U.S. citizens since 1917 because of the Jones Act, and they treat us like garbage.
Mm-hmm.
They treat us like garbage, como si fuéramos animales.
Mm-hmm.
And they start abusing us, and we have to form street gangs in New York City for protection. And hence, you see that portrayed in West Side Story.
And
So,
you, of course, decide at the appropriate moment of the anniversary to reimagine West Side Story, and you do so in a way not only musically speaking, but what the message is behind West Side Story. So, in a moment, we're going to hear New Yorican song from one of your albums recorded live. But I wonder, Bobby, as we go through what we go through today with the new paradigm, as I've said, the genie's out of the bottle. We're not
right.
going to go back to pre COVID 19, and we're not going to go back to pre George Floyd's murder. That's not going to happen. Especially because young people are going to make sure, in my opinion, that does not happen. But that being said, in context to where we are today with regards to music and our rich history of music, when you see, I went to DC last year, thanks to Alex Rodriguez and his wife. We went to see the Museum of African American History and Culture, which blew me away. Which, by the way, has a segment that includes Celia and Mongo Santa Maria within, the exhibitions.
I've seen that. I've seen that. But
And
they got
so
to do more. They got to do more.
that's where I was getting to, right? So how do we get to what's our role? You're now doing radio. You're teaching at Manhattan. You're still performing with your big band, and you have a platform now that allows you to do so many different things. Let's share with each other, especially since we have Eggy on and we have others who are part of our nucleus, part of our ecosystem. What are your thoughts as to where we need to go and how do we go about doing it?
Well, at this point in my life, I'm
And before you
63.
answer the question, hold on.
Yeah,
Excuse me. Pardon the interruption. Perdón.
sure, sure.
Listen to this. Sounds like Dr.
Chris Washburn,
Washburn.
the mighty Chris Washburn on
Sounds like Dr.
trombone.
Washburn.
And he wrote that piece in honor of the New York Puerto Rican community. It's called New York Rican Song, but song is spelled S-O-N, like, and so
Anywho.
New York Rican son. I'm a son
Mhm.
of Puerto Ricanos in New York City. Yeah. Well, I mean, listen, in context with everything that's happening now, at this point in my life, I mean, I've always been battling. When I listen, people have asked me, when did you start activism? I said, man, the first week I was in first grade at Immaculate Conception School in the South Bronx. I go, how was that? He goes, man, all these guys were in the cafeteria during lunch, and they were all laughing. So I come over and I go with my tray and I go, hey, what are you guys laughing at? You know, and no, everybody got quiet. And then all of a sudden, yeah, what's happening? You know? And he goes, one guy who was Italian American goes, we're laughing at you, you stupid spick. Just like that. I go, you guys are stupid and this and I'm looking at that's the first time I ever heard that word. I didn't know what it meant, but I knew it was bad because the way he was saying it very aggressively.
Right.
So I just looked, like I was frozen, and I said, I'm stupid. I speak 2 languages. How many languages do you speak? And there was like silence for like 3 or 4 seconds. And everybody goes, oh, Sanabria, whatever, you know, like this and that and the other. They started applauding, and it's, you know, it's a New York. That's nothing strange. It's a New York thing. I mean, to challenge people, like, you know, you get insulted to see what you do to come back, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. But it was really hurtful and mean. Sure. And my mother went through that. There's an episode of it's called The Latin Americans. It was a 4-part series on PBS. My mother talks about that. When she came from Puerto Rico, she's gets on a bus here in New York City, in the Bronx, and a woman next to her with a cane starts hitting her and started, get off the bus, you dirty Puerto Rican, this, that, and instead of somebody helping her, people start laughing. Those are the kinds of experiences that you know, so it's not about color. It's about, you know, my mother, Chacho, mi mamá es una jíbara del campo de Yabucoa. She's from Yabucoa, Puerto Rico. She's from the barrio Jacanas, way up in the mountains and everything. And she's very light skinned or whatever. So, but they knew somehow she was Puerto Riqueña. Probably, you know why? Because she was dressed elegantly and with class.
I would imagine. Imagine.
So she had to go through that. I had to go through that. So I've been an activist ever since that time period. And la cosa es que hoy en día lo que tenemos que hacer, what we have to do today is pelear y luchar. We have to fight for righteousness. And that goes across the board in terms of we being musicians. I'm tired of jazz musicians saying that Latinos getting into jazz. Wow, what a hip thing. Latinos finally getting into jazz. What are you talking about, man? If it wasn't for us, jazz would never have even been born. There were Puerto Ricans, Cubans, Dominicans, Panamanians in New Orleans back in the 19th century. Why do you think all those rhythms like La Habanera, the Tresillo, the Clave, you hear them all in New Orleans, marching cadences and all? Jelly Roll Morton said to play jazz authentically, you have to have the Spanish tinge. When he meant Spanish, he meant the Caribbean tinge. There were Mexicans in 1884, the 7th Regimental Cavalry Band that came from Mexico to New Orleans to play at the World's Fair, the World's Cotton Exposition, and they exposed New Orleans musicians to incredible, you know, music. I want
people to hear this. Give me a second. Hold on.
Dr. Chris Washburn, trombone. Yeah. Cuban music with a New York attitude.
I just want to make sure we heard that. Cuban music with a New York attitude.
Yeah, and that goes to the Puerto Rican community. We've never been given the credit that we so richly deserve for keeping Cuban music alive. There would be no Cuban music today if it wasn't for the Puerto Rican community of Puerto Rico and of New York City. When I've been to Cuba and they find out that I'm Puerto Riqueño, the first thing out of their mouths, gracias por preservando nuestra cultura y música cubana en los Estados Unidos. Es cierto. You know, and I mean, you know, forget it. I mean, it goes on and on and on. So Chris Washburn has written a beautiful book called Latin Jazz, The Other Jazz, as a corrective, because it's like the most basic thing. Who invented Afro-Cuban jazz? Everybody says in jazz academia, Dizzy Gillespie. First of all, they leave out Chano Pozo's name, who was Cuban, but it wasn't them. It was the Machito Afro-Cubans. How come they can't say that? How come they can't say it's Mario Balsa? Why? Because we happen to be Latino. Oh, they're not sophisticated enough to invent anything, you know. So, and I'm just touching the tip of the iceberg. So at this point in my life, well, I've always, since I've known you, we've talked
Yeah,
about these kind
yeah,
of
we've
things.
spoken about this
Yeah,
intensely,
yeah.
intensely.
So
But
it's this is nothing new. There were Latinos in there were 18 Puerto Ricanos in the Harlem Hellfighters
mhm,
U.S. Army Regimental Band that went to Europe in 1918. There were 44 members that went in the band. 18 of them were Puerto Ricanos, and they exposed African American culture through ragtime music in a marching band context to European audiences. And guess who was in that band? Don
Rafael
Rafael
Hernandez,
Hernandez as a
Rafael
trombonist,
Hernandez. Yeah,
our
Rafael Hernandez.
greatest composer, and not only our greatest Puerto Rican composer, but the most beloved composer in all of Latin America.
Hmm.
There isn't a place in Latin America that today isn't playing something of Rafael Hernandez.
For sure,
So
for
these
sure.
are the hidden truths that we have to get out there and talk about and not be in this subservient position
Hmm.
that, oh, you know, the musicians in jazz, they're the highest. No, 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 no. I played some music last night on my radio show, a merengue,
Hmm.
and I said after it, uh, I bet you thought you those of you listening probably said, "Wow, it sounds like ragtime, right?" I goes,
Right.
"No, no, ragtime sounds like that, you know,
You
because
reversed it.
there were Dominicans, Puerto Ricans, Cubans, and Haitians in New Orleans in the 19th century, and that's the root of ragtime: the syncopated bass lines, all of
Hmm.
that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
So we are part and parcel of the jazz continuum. We're not this separate thing. We are part of it, and if it wasn't for us, jazz would not exist today in any shape or form. So don't believe the okey doke that you saw with those 18 hours with Ken Burns.
Oh boy, let's not go there.
The reason,
But we need to. Yeah, we need to
yeah,
call it out. We need to call it out.
the reason this happens is because historians look at the history of this country in only two ways: black and white. And there's brown, tan, red, yellow, all of that. And we represent all of that. So to ignore us and our contributions is first indifference to us. Quiere decir que no los respetan. We don't respect you. Because we don't think you even exist in the paradigm of this country. And second, it's inhumane. It takes away your humanity.
Hmm.
I exist. My people from Puerto Rico did so much in New York City that you know what? We transformed New York City into una caldera, a cauldron of rhythm with our music, our culture, our dance, our food, our poetry. I bet people don't realize that if it wasn't for Puerto Ricans fighting in New York City, there would be no bilingual education
For
today
sure,
in the
for sure.
United States. People, so my doing West Side Story Reimagined was me flipping the script and giving us homage, giving us the credit that we so rightfully deserve, in our case as Puerto Ricanos, because
Hmm.
we set the stage for every group from Latin America to
That's right.
come. We took all
Right.
the knocks, we took all the, and we still do.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and that's nothing against our brethren from all of Latin
Hmm.
America, because
Hmm.
my philosophy is that of Simon Bolivar. You
Hmm.
know, we are one entire entity
Hmm.
together, and that includes Brazil.
Hmm.
But hay que darle crédito a la gente que lucharon y pelearon, y eso fue la comunidad puertorriqueña en Nueva York. That was the community of Puerto Ricans that came. My mother and father from the island, they met here. My father from Guanica, my mother from Jabuco, they met here in New York City, and many others, and contributed to this great city. And if that means that we transformed New York City into a cauldron of rhythm, what it is today, then, and New York City is the leading city in the United States, wow, that must mean that we transformed the world.
Hmm. Well,
Interesante, ¿verdad?
well, in your New York Ache, and those of you who are watching and listening to this, Bobby and I, like he said, since he was 18 years old, I was 25. We've known each other, so we've got a long 45 years of friendship. And if you look at Bobby's history, there's nuestro amigo Rolando Rivera pregunta, do you have a book where you talk about the Latino influence in the United States?
Yeah, you could
Um,
get a book called Latin Jazz the first of the fusions by John Storm Roberts. That'll
Yeah,
start you off.
yeah.
Get that book. You can order it right now on Amazon.
And speaking about John Storm Roberts, you know this because I tell everybody I spend more time down here now than I had in a long time, and I've had some special guests sleep right there. Well, I'm pointing, you can't see it. That included John Storm Roberts. Perry Thomas spent a night here, and a few others. And I think about this, I go, oh my God, I had these guys. And I didn't bother to take pictures back then. It was just the fact that they were in my home, and I felt honored that they would spend a night, break bread in the morning, etc. But what I wanted to say to the people who are watching is John Santos in the West Coast and you and a few others, make sure that every time you put together an album, a CD, it's not just the music, it's the historical context and information that enriches the album. And I remember on this album, let me see if I put this up for people to see. This one here, I hope I did. This one. In
Oh,
your
lyrics
liner
to the
notes,
Ache, yeah. Yeah.
that was your first one, remember?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
and I don't have it in front of me, but I remember the liner notes were something along the line. It starts off something along the lines of, "To know your ancestors is to live forever." A Congolese proverb. I think it was something
Right.
like that,
Yeah,
right?
that's it. That's it. Yeah.
To know your ancestors is to live forever. And I share with people my favorite African proverb, which is, "Until the lion tell the story of the hunt, the hunter will always be glorified," which
Right.
basically is it's important for us to be the lions. That's why I call you a lion. I call Martin Cohen a lion, Richard Snyder a lion, and others who are out there, Mary Kent, etc. Because it's upon us telling our story as lions that people will then acknowledge and recognize and get the other point of view that is not Eurocentric, um, and that it will put people in the right place. So, for instance, I'm going to go up a bit because I'm going to share some of the things that people are saying here. So, you were talking about jazz, Wanti Sol, right? With Duke Ellington, the role he played. Um, we have here,
There's many, many others.
oh, yeah.
Chacho, es increíble la cantidad de músicos latinos que han contribuido a la historia de jazz. It's
Hmm.
amazing. It's just simply amazing. I mean, there was a guy, Louis King Garcia,
Hmm.
Puerto Rican, used to play trumpet with Woody Herman, I mean, with Benny Goodman at times. I mean, that's just another example.
Hmm.
Uh, I mean, what can you say? I mean,
Yeah. And so I say that because I think, when I think about you, and I've told you this offline, for the most part, we think of drummers, young people immediately think of Tito Puente, think of timbaleros. We think about the people who play in Latin percussion. And the subject matter tomorrow is really going to
right,
be
right,
around
right,
Latin
right.
percussion because we have Martin Cohen. But, I remember in high school going to Casa Margarita in Atorrey to see drum clinics, to see Joe Morello, to see,
Right.
Louis Hay. I mean, just to see all those great drummers. Well, Alfredo de los Reyes, he did a drum clinic with Joe Morello as well. To see drummers, not timbaleros, not congueros, but trap set. And that was because I
Right.
was in love with Gene Krupa. That was basically Gene Krupa was like my idol. I said, like, holy cow.
You and
In your
Tito Puente, yeah, yeah. He
and,
loved Gene Krupa as well. Yeah.
and in your case, you sit down and you play drums. But when you sit down and play drums, you have drums, a trap set with the tom toms, cymbals, hi hat, snare,
Right, right.
timbales, and Latin percussion, and you're doing everything at the same time. Let's talk a little bit about that mindset of being able to play traps and do the Latin percussion.
Well, again, I'm not the first to do it. Many
Hmm.
people have done it before. You mentioned the great maestro Wilfredo de los Reyes, who might even be watching right now. He's
Hmm.
in California. We frequently speak. Uh, but really, and there were many others in California as well, doing Mexican American drummers, percussionists. But the thing that makes us special is that not only we're drummers, we have that uh, dominion of the drum set, but we're also percussionists as well. So
Hmm.
when I'm playing the drum set with my big band, the Multiverse Big Band, and he and we get to play. And if I'm playing a mambo oriented type of thing, I'm not thinking like a drum set. I'm thinking like a timbalero. I have all that
Hmm.
vocabulary inside of me, and I should, because that means that, because that's my function in the band in that moment, in that type of, in that genre of music. But the prototype of what I do today, and many other great drummers that are playing in the world of jazz today that happen to be Latino, is a Puerto Riqueño,
Mm-hmm.
William Correa,
Mm-hmm.
Willie Bobo,
Willie
a New
Bobo.
York Rican.
Willie Bobo.
And if you don't believe me, get the album Inventions and Dimensions by Herbie Hancock. When that album came out, I believe it was 1964, people thought, and I've talked to people like Charles Tolliver and many others in the jazz community, man, everybody thought it was Philly Joe Jones
Mm-hmm.
playing the drum set. Because on that album, there's on the opening tune, Jackrabbit, Willie's playing the timbales, Osvaldo Chihuahua Martinez is playing the congas, which is another interesting thing, because a lot of people just looked at Osvaldo Chihuahua Martinez as just a charanga timbalero. Nobody knew he could play congas and shekere and all that stuff.
Uh-huh.
So people tend to look at us in a myopic kind of way, that we're not versatile. But in any case, the story goes, and I asked Herbie Hancock personally, how did you get involved with Willie? I says, I wanted a drummer for this album that I was doing for Blue Note, my first album on Blue Note. And I wanted somebody that could be versatile. And I asked Miles Davis, and Miles Davis said, get Willie Bobo,
Mm-hmm.
who is a native New York Rican.
Mm-hmm.
Willie Bobo is an extension of Tito Puente. He was like 10 to 15 years younger than Tito. So Tito's influences were big band swing in the 20s and 30s. Willie Bobo's influences are bebop,
Mm-hmm.
more advanced form of jazz harmonically. Not that Tito didn't embrace that as well. He did, especially from a writing standpoint. But the people that Willie hung out with were people like Roy Haynes and Max Roach, etc. So he was able to function in that capacity, swinging like a real legitimate jazz drummer. And I hate to use that word legitimate, but it's the best word I can come up with now. And sound authentic in the style. And then I'll turn around and play a son montuno on the timbales, or a danzón, whatever. So not many players had that vocabulary together. Willie was a product of his environment.
Yeah.
So when I heard that record, when I was in grammar school, I said to myself, wow, it could be done. I could do, because people tell you things like, oh, you got to choose one style. You can't be proficient at others. Right. And I started thinking about it, and I said, man, that's like somebody telling me, you know what, stick to Spanish and English, but forget about learning Portuguese or Russian or Italian or whatever. Yeah. They're like trying to tell you, don't expand your horizons, don't learn other languages. And this is all this is all these things are just languages, lenguajes. So Willie, it represents what I am today and everybody else that's out there, Horacio Negro Hernandez, and of course Wilfredo de los Reyes too, did it even before Willie. So, I mean, the reason, and listen, I think you mentioned Mike Collazo before.
Mm-hmm.
Mike Collazo was the drum set player with Tito Puente's band in the 70s. And then I came into that band after him, because he went with Orchestra Broadway to play timbales.
Right.
Now, I have seen Mike at a rehearsal with Luis Ramirez playing bongo, playing the hell out of bongo.
Mm-hmm.
And we did a gig one time. Carlos Barberia calls me for a gig. I'm on timbales, and he somehow called me and Mike at the same time. So I go, Carlos, ¿qué es lo que tú quieres que yo haga? What do you want me to do? Let Mike do the gig. No. You play timbales. Yo le voy a decir a Mike que traiga una conga. Let Mike play conga. Mm-hmm. Mike came with a conga, and he played the hell out of the conga.
Mm-hmm.
And the conga drum is the first instrument that I've played as a kid, rumbeando in the parks in the South Bronx. I play all of those instruments, including vibes and marimba, and I've been fortunate that I'm documented playing all of those instruments on recordings. So it just goes to show you our versatility as musicians, particularly Puerto Rican percussionists.
Yeah.
I mean,
and we have to name Steve Berrios. We have to
forget it, Steve. Well. Yeah, Steve, man.
Steve has to be part of that group. And now we have Henry Cole, who from Mayagüez, Puerto Rico, who's playing.
Henry was my student. Henry was my student at my high school music.
So we've got all these talented, and then you were here. I'm going to put this up. jar a little bit of memory.
Oh yeah. Oh
We
my
had Tito
God, man.
Puente and Machito, both of them on stage at the same time. And then you had Sonny Stitt on saxophone and Willie Bobo invited guests. Willie played with Machito and Sonny played with Tito on that night. Do you remember that concert?
Yeah, I remember that. I was backstage, if you remember.
Yeah, yeah. That's why I'm bringing it up.
Una anécdota bien
Ooh.
interesante. See, after that time at the Harbor House, me and
Mm-hmm.
Tito became friends, and he
Mm-hmm.
mentioned me. You know, he called
Mm-hmm.
me up, everyone out of the blue.
Uh-huh.
Bobby, what's up? I go, who's this? He goes, what do you mean, who it is? Who is it? This is your godfather, you know, Tito Puente. It's funny, Joe Conso does the same thing, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But in any case, went backstage, and I think you were there too.
Yeah, I was the MC and I was backstage.
Yeah, but
Remember the conversations? It was crazy.
yeah,
It was crazy.
Machito is tearing Tito Puente a new one. Tito is with in his hand has a glass of cognac and he's
Yep.
looking down and he's
Yep.
shivering.
Yep.
And
Yep.
Machito's yelling at him, going, parece mentira que tú me estás insultando a mí y mi orquesta así, que tú quieres que yo abre para ti cuando nosotros fuimos los que te enseñamos a tocar esta música cuando tú fuiste un jovencito you know, and what's I forgot Machito's wife's name. Oh, y Hilda,
Uh-huh.
te cuidaba cuando tú eras un mojoncito. You know, like
Yeah.
he's yelling at Tito, going, "You want us?" He goes, "I can't believe you're insulting me, telling me that you want me to open up for you
Yeah.
when we were the ones that taught you how to play this music when you were a little kid." And Hilda, my wife, used to babysit you when you were in diapers. And Tito's like a little, you
No,
know,
he was looking down. Si maestro, si
yeah,
maestro,
yeah, yeah,
si
yeah. And
maestro,
he's
si
like,
maestro, si maestro, si
man,
maestro.
it
No,
was
it,
like, and then Tito came out. And as you well know, the sound was terrible that day.
yeah,
But
yeah,
luckily,
symphony
we were
hall,
on the
symphony.
side so we could hear
Yeah,
better.
yeah, yeah.
And Tito came out, and the first thing he did was he played Mambo In,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
which is one of the theme songs of the Machito Orchestra, along
yeah.
with Tanga. And he just tore the place apart. He
Yeah.
just tore it apart.
Yeah,
He rose to the occasion.
yeah.
Machito, he was so upset that he came out. And I remember he must have been so upset. He counted off the first tune too slow.
Uh-huh.
He had a hit at that time. Salsa somos salsero,
Yeah.
conocido en el mundo entero. That's the tune. It's a son monturo.
Yep.
He
Yep.
counted off like this. Salsa somos salsa. And I said, after the first 10 seconds, I said, oh my God, man. He counted it off too slow.
Yeah.
And it was just, you know,
No.
Tito annihilated him. And then they played that tune that that Tito had written called Mambo Adonis,
Mm-hmm.
which everybody today knows as Machito Forever, because when Machito died, I believe in 84, 85, he changed the title. Mambo Adonis was written for Joey Adonis, the mobster.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a song that that Tito would play on New Year's Eve. They would always have the three bands, Machito, Tito Puente, and Tito Rodriguez, playing at the Palladium Ballroom at midnight in New York City. And that was the tune they would play at the stroke of midnight, Mambo Adonis, to enter the new year. And then Tito changed it to Machito Forever. So the real title is Mambo Adonis, for those of you who really want to know.
Yeah.
But for Tito, it was cool anyway because he collects royalties. It has two titles.
Yeah, he gets it 2 times.
Yeah,
The
but
other-
anyway, that I always remember that Sonny Stitt came out
Mm-hmm.
and he was a little bit, as we say, imbibed.
Mm-hmm.
And as you remember, Machito was yelling at Sonny Stitt, the great tenor saxophones, alto saxophone, and he goes, "I don't believe it. You learn anything from Charlie Parker? You know, this, that, and the other." And he's yelling at Sonny Stitt the same thing. Sonny's putting his head down.
Oh yeah.
I always remember that. And then Jose Madera told me at the end, you know, after they played Machito Forever, and then Willie Bobo was also a little bit imbibed.
Mm-hmm.
And when he came out, you know, everybody remembers those recordings that Willie Bobo did with Cal Jada, where he solos on Mom Blues and Cuban Fancy, those incredible timbazos. He came out, and what happens? Tito Puente just rips him to shreds. Rips him to shreds. And you know that because you were there.
Well,
And then who was the promoter of it?
George Wing.
George Wing
George Wing.
is backstage, as you know,
Mm-hmm.
cursing
Mm-hmm.
because both Sonny Stitt and Willie Bobo are imbibed, and all the money he spent on flying them in and this, that, and the other. And Sonny played. He came out, He walked out slow. He didn't even have a stand for his saxophones. He just
Yeah.
puts one on the
Yeah.
floor, solos, then picks up the other one. It was embarrassing, but I remember
Right.
that night well. And Jose Madera, who played that night,
Hmm.
was playing congas that night. He goes to me, Bobby, you should have heard it on the bus on the way back because both bands were on the bus going back to New York. Tito was in the back and Machito was in the front, cursing out Tito from the beginning of the trip from Boston all the way back to New York. And Tito was in the back, according to Jose. He was crying
Yeah. No,
like
no,
a kid.
he took it heavy. And I remember also part of the conversation, in addition to everything you've explicitly shared with us, and was that if you remember when Machito opened, he was upset already, and then when he
Yeah,
opened, he played. I think he played like two tunes in the
right,
time that he had. He played two tunes. He made them long, and I want to remember, was Jorge Adalto playing piano? I think Jorge Adalto may have been the pianist, but in any case, I remember that he came on stage and he played two tunes during the allotted time. When Tito came on stage, he played like four tunes in the allotted time
right,
because
right,
Tito was able to put all those, and he did it. He did the count right away, right? So it was
right,
Mambo in, and then right in, he jumped into Que bueno baila usted,
right,
Que
right.
bueno baila usted. So
It
he
was
did,
exciting. It was
yeah.
exciting.
So he did four songs, and so then now Machito comes and he says, "How is it he got to play four songs and I got to play two?" And I said, "Maestro, él él tocó cuatro canciones en el mismo tiempo que usted tocó dos. No, no, no. Él tiene que tocar la misma cantidad que yo. Pero
Right,
maestro, es el mismo tiempo, no es la cantidad de canciones, es el tiempo. No, no puede ser. He was so upset. And then the other piece was, if you remember, it's in the Boston Globe article. Bob Blumenthal wrote the review, and he titled "The Battle of the Bands" is what he titled it.
right, right, right,
There was smoke that was coming from the back, from the spotlight. So we had a moment where I had to ask everybody from stage. They told me, "Look, there's a fire," and I said, "What do you mean there's a fire?" They said, "Well, we don't know if it's a fire, but there's smoke coming out in the back. You're gonna have to ask people to quietly and orderly get out of the hall. This is Symphony Hall, 2,700 people, 2,600 people in the hall." And I
right,
remember coming on stage and asking people to quietly go out. I don't want them to panic, et cetera, et cetera. So they go out. And I took advantage of that time to talk to, who was it? So it was Machito's wife, and it was the daughter, Paula. Paula, que la hija, ¿no?
Paula said, yeah.
Paula.
His
And so
daughter.
then, I spoke to him. And then when I came back up again on stage, we welcomed everybody back. Thank you. It's gotten taken care of. Ladies and gentlemen, let's continue with the show. And we're going to continue with Machito. But before I introduce Machito once again, I want to say hello to his wife. Will you please stand? So his wife stood up. And we got to make sure that you understand that that young lady who's singing there, that's his daughter, Paula. And of course, people plotting. And then I remember when I come off stage and I go back, George Wein says, "What are you doing?" I said, "I need to calm this guy down. Don't you see how pissed off he is? I got to do
Right.
anything and everything I can to give him props because right now he is not in a good mood." And he says to me, "Okay, okay, okay. You handle it. You handle it." And it was George Wein basically, scolding me because I was doing something out of the ordinary. But I remember that night because it was very special. The same way, I remember when you were Mario Bauza, and it was a twin bill for the Boston Globe Jazz Festival,
Right.
and it was Mario Bauza and Eddie Palmieri at the Ciclorama, And at that time period, um, Natasha was doing a very special program for PBS about Mario Bauza,
Right.
and
I
they were
remember.
filming everything of that nature. And I remember, again, I was part of the production and the MC, and I brought Mario out, and the crowd was younger, much younger, and they were more like a Palmieri crowd. And they were tepid in their applause for Mario. And then when Eddie came out, everybody was going crazy. And I remember Mario was feeling really bummed out. He was backstage, like down, like his career was over. And then the next time I came on stage, I remember sort of like doing a quick history lesson about Mario's Bazaar
Right.
place in our history and how
Right.
he deserved, and people then understood why he was so important in the music, and then it turned things around. But I want to take a moment as people are watching this stuff, is because you played with Mongo Sanabria. You obviously were in the grace of Tito Puente and his big band and all those great musicians that were playing during that period of time. And you spent more than 3 years with Mario Bauza, which is
I,
like spend,
I
it's like
spent I spent almost 10 years with
There
Mario.
you go. 10
Yeah.
years with El Maestro. And I remember, I'm going to bring this up once again for people to see. This particular day, we were at the Strand Theater, and the Maestro, before the concert, gave a lecture, a free lecture on the history of the music of which you participated in. And I was saying, this is the way concerts should be from now on. It should be that when we have people like that, we got to take advantage of them and
Yeah.
just listen to them, share their history and share everything that their knowledge. We've got to document this, because if we don't, we're going to miss it. And I'm still waiting for the day that we have a Mario Bauza road, street, avenue, place, something in New York. It could be the address of his apartment where he lived in for so many years. It could be this
944
one.
Columbus Avenue. Yeah.
Yeah, 944 Columbus Avenue. I'm waiting for that. I'm waiting for the Jerry Gonzalez, Andy Gonzalez
Right.
Plaza, whatever it is. We need to acknowledge our great cultural warriors and musicians, because it's important not only for our generation but the young generations to be able to understand that these people deserve this kind of acknowledgement and recognition because of who they are and what they've done for our culture and for our music. And so I know you're one of the guys that does that kind of work down there. And anything I can do from my end up here, Bobby, count on me, cuenta conmigo,
Seguro que sí.
organizamos, hacemos lo que sea necesario para que se dé el día cuando podamos celebrar, igual que tenemos Machito y Tito Puente, que tengamos a Mario Bauzá y Jerry González y Andy González, etcétera, etcétera, etcétera.
Yeah, it's right now the last thing that I was involved in, and my wife Elena, we were involved in, the great Elena Martinez, who's one of our greatest folklorists and cultural anthropologists here in the United States. We were instrumental, along with Larry Harlow, Henry Medina, Jose Mendez, who we affectionately call Don Yello, Ralph Mendez, in getting a street name for Arsenio Rodriguez in the South Bronx, near where he lived, near Prospect Avenue. Prospect Avenue, a lot of people don't understand. In the corner of Prospect, Westchester, and Longwood Avenue, there's a record store there called Casa Amadeo. When Mike just Mike just reopened. Yeah, Mike, we got a street naming for him. Mike Amadeo is a great composer. He's the one that composed Que Me Roden en Vida for El Gran Combo, De Ti Depende for Hector Lavoe, and many other songs. In terms of the history of guarachas and boleros and son montunos. And his father, Tite Amadeo, was another great composer, los dos puertorriqueños. And then I was instrumental in getting that street name for him as well. Prospect Avenue was interesting because a lot of Black Cubans lived there. And that's where El Club Cubano used to exist, on Prospect Avenue. A lot of old tobacco workers that had moved here to New York City founded the Club Cubano. And also, that's the legend goes, that's where Mongo Santamaria first rehearsed Watermelon Man. That's the legend. But there were a lot of Cubanos living in the Bronx, including Mongo Santamaria and and they used to go to Arsenio Rodriguez's house in the Bronx to rumbear. And Ray Barreto talks about that. Yeah, Ray Barreto talks about that.
I want people who are watching, la gente que está mirando, y gracias aquí. Mary, quien pregunta qué año fue el concierto de I think it was 1979, if I'm not mistaken, Mary. That's when we did it, because I just started the show in 75, so it was around 4 years later. And that was the beginning of my doing concerts at that level with the Boston Globe Jazz Festival. And then Chris, who of course was with us, says it's great stuff. Eggy, our dear friend, estas son las tertulias que a mí me gustan. Gracias a los dos, gracias a ti. Ceci says amen. Orlando, great show. Thank you both. Thank you. Melissa Quinn said, Bobby, you need to write a book. Too many good stories that should not be forgotten. Well,
imagínate the ones that I can't tell. But but the thing is that I've always been fortunate, because I've always been the youngest person in the bands that I worked in when I was coming up. And that, to the grace of Olodumare, God, is because of my, people like the way I performed and my talent, etc. But I always took advantage of that fact and always asked the older musicians. That's right, Billy Cobham is from Panama, and we spoke last month. There's a lot of great Panamanian musicians. Eric Dalfi, the legendary jazz alto saxophonist. Do you know that he's Panameño? Luis Russell. Somebody mentioned Luis Russell before. He was Panamanian. He was Louis Armstrong's piano player and the director of Louis Armstrong's big band. You know, when Louis Armstrong had a big band. So, see, you know, like I said before, the history of Latinos in
We're
jazz.
there. We're there.
You know, like now somebody would tell you something like, "Yeah, but Billy Cobham is black." That's true,
Yeah.
but he's also Panamanian.
Yeah.
You know, and
He's
he's
afro-panameño,
never forgotten that. So
afro-panameño, afro-panameño. Es como dice Angélica, mira, la historia de la música afro-latina. That's the reason when I do this show, when I've been doing the radio, and we're going to end soon because they're going to cut us off. They talk about Vitín Paz, the great trumpet player, claro, de Panamá también. Eh, when 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 I started doing the show 45 years ago, I always had it as my goal and my premise and the why behind I do the show. First and foremost, to make us proud of our Afro Latino heritage. Number one, not to say anything else is not worth us being proud, but the fact that people would always think about the Eurocentric part of our heritage as being worthy of us to be proud. I said no, 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 because there's a reason for us to be proud of our African heritage. Number one. And number two, I think that it's important, Mauricio Smith, the flute player, yes, it's
yeah,
important for us to think about how do we do a generational handoff, right? How do we give the mantle to somebody else? There's a young man named Johnny Giraldo who's watching now, who is a melomano. He studies everything that has to do with history. He drinks it, he eats it, he loves it. And there's others who are watching from other places who are doing the same thing. So we're going to quickly move before we cut out because now for a year you've been doing Latin Cruise and Danilo Perez. Of course, how can we not mention Danilo Perez, especially when I have this photo to share? How do you like that photo? That brings back
yeah.
memories.
Oh
That
wow.
brings back memories. That was at Scullers. That was the Scullers. You were
Yeah,
playing with
yeah.
Larry Harlow.
And
Larry
that's
Harlow.
man. I I don't want to tell you what the musicians in the band call that vest, but we had to wear that vest for Larry. That was part of the
That
uniform.
was your
So,
uniform. But anyway, so now you've moved into a year later. It's been a year. You've been doing it for a year.
the
A
radio
program,
show, the Latin Jazz
the
Cruise. Yeah.
Latin Jazz Cruise, which I support wholeheartedly, and I believe all of us to be supporting because we want to make sure that stays alive. Talked about your role there and what you hope to accomplish every Friday for those hours that you're on the air, the Latin Jazz Cruise.
Well, my goals are simple: to educate the public.
Hmm.
Uh, because I'm a musician, I have a little bit more technical. I have technical insight into the music. So if I play something by a Brazilian artist, uh, and you know, normally people announcers would just announce the piece, etc. Of course, they're playing it because they like the piece and it's beautiful, whatever. But I'll go the extra mile and say, you just heard that piece by such and such an artist, and that was a rhythm from the northeast of Brazil,
Hmm.
known as baong. And the baong usually is played with a zambumba, which is a
Hmm.
thin bass drum, similar to the bass drum that's used in Cuba, but it's a little bit different, you know, a little bit smaller, and a triangle is used, etc. And it has that basic cadence to the rhythm. Kum, 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 kum. So, and in 5 seconds, less than 10 seconds, I've given you the gist
Right.
of what the rhythm is about. So the
Right.
next time you hear something like that, somebody would say, "Wow, it's not a samba, it's a baon."
Hmm.
You know, I remember Bobby saying that. You know,
Hmm.
so et cetera, things like that. And also, I expose a lot of artists that people aren't aware of from the past. For
Hmm.
example, when I first started the show, I started playing things by a great saxophonist from the Dominican Republic, Davito Vasquez,
Hmm.
who is the Charlie Parker of the Dominican Republic.
Hmm.
You ask Paquito de Rivera about Davito Vasquez. Oh, Paquito. Paquito will go, oh, Tavito, El Charlie Parker, Dominicano, you know, this, that, and the other. So people need to know about these people.
Hmm.
I played something a few weeks ago of Carmen Miranda. Somebody just mentioned Jose Rodriguez from Brazil, who was the second trombonist for Eddie Palmieri.
Hmm.
I played something 2 weeks ago by Carmen Miranda from 1939. And I asked the people, guess who this is? And I played it. Nobody, you know, could guess. And it was Carmen Miranda. I played it because it has a beautiful cavaquinho solo.
Yeah.
It's the mandolin
Yeah.
of Brazil. And I got to mention that. And I got to school people about Carmen Miranda. She's not just the person with the fruit in her in that hat, etc., that she always wore. And a lot of people don't know that hat that she wore is a traditional headgear that's used in Bahia, the most African part of Brazil. And the reason I learned that because I saw an interview with her, Carmen Miranda, in by the BBC, and she talked about that.
Yeah.
So she was down
Yeah.
with exposing the culture in her
Yeah.
own way, just like Desi are now. So
Yeah.
esta gente se tiene que respetar. They are
Claro.
our
Claro.
pioneers.
Claro. I have a feeling we're going to be cut off momentarily, but let me close with our friend Arturo Gomez, who says the following. I wrote an essay about Cubanos in the Bronx, especially in Longwood area. Most were like family orientales. Many, like my mom's brothers, were married to Borincanos. Most of my family lived on Tiffany Street and Westchester. My dad didn't want to be so close to my mom's family, so we lived in East Tremont. Sent that essay about Cubanos in the Bronx to Elena. So you must have it somewhere. Elena must have
Yeah,
it
yeah.
in her
Arturo's a
mail.
great Arturo's a great champion
Oh yeah.
of our music, and
Yep.
he's a Bronxite. You know,
Yeah.
so,
Yeah. Besides
I
the
mean,
Club Cubano, El Tropicano was owned by Cuban. Several bodegas politeros along with were Cubanos too. And then Ceci asked the question. So it's WBGO, my friends. Here it is. WBGO.org. It's on Friday nights. I listen to it when I can. And you can also download the archives, which I do more often than not because if I'm busy on Friday, I want to find a way to be able to
yeah.
listen to both of them.
If you want to listen to the show right now, last night's show,
Yep.
all you have to do is go to put in your search window WBGO Latin Jazz Cruise, Cruise, and you'll be able to hear last night's show and the week before for the next 2 weeks. So you can do that right now or
There you
listen at
go.
5 o'clock
There
in
you
the morning or wherever you want.
go.
So we'd love for you to listen.
Yeah.
But I must say the same thing about advocacy, peleando y luchando. Years ago, when Awilda Rivera was the host, they took the show off the air. I caused a big stink, and not only me, a bunch of other people. We got Congresswoman Nydia Velasquez, everybody involved. They had to bring the show back. Not only did they bring the show back, but because of that pelea, that fight, they incorporate all the DJs on the radio station WBGO, which is the #1 jazz station in the nation. All the DJs now have to play on every third cut or fourth cut. They have to play some Latin jazz.
There you
They
go.
have to.
There you go.
So there you go. You gotta make your voice heard. Pelear y luchar. And of course, Black Lives Matter. All lives matter, obviously, but Black Lives Matter. And we're talking about Black lives. We're talking about us too, because la lucha de ellos es la lucha nuestra también.
Sí.
And blackness is part and parcel of our culture. As soon as you hear the music, doesn't matter how white you are in Latin America, you start getting jiggy with it. And that, it's like Carlos Santana says.
It's a DNA. It's part of
Yeah,
our DNA.
Carlos Santana says it. Once you hear it, your molecular structure changes. That no importa no importa que tenga pelo rubio or whatever. It doesn't matter if you have blonde hair, green eyes, or whatever. All of a sudden, you become African. So that's the beauty. That is the beauty of our multiculturalism, and we should be proud of it. We should be proud of it. Now that all of these things are happening, we have to get more woke than ever, and we have to thank the Machito Afro-Cubans for starting that movement here in the United States, simply because of the title of the band.
Yeah. So we're going to close out, and the way I close out, and speaking about lucha, many of the people who are watching the show went up on my behalf years ago when they were cutting out all the music programs on WBR. I'm the last of the music programs. They cut out jazz, they cut out classical, and the only reason I lasted was there's a woman watching, Margaret Summers, called me after she worked at BR. She went to a meeting, she found out they were cutting the shows. She went out of the station, called me and said they're planning on cutting your show. And I quickly mobilized the community of many who are watching the show right now. And they were on the street. They were on the street in front of BUR. They were every single place for about a month or so, and BUR had to back off. And I've been on the air for 45 years because the people who watch the show son la gente que hacen posible que con salsa. Y por eso yo siempre digo, mira, la familia con salsa son ustedes. Ustedes hacen posible que el programa sea lo que sea cada fin de semana, sábado por la noche, igual que mi amigo y compañero, el gran Bobby Sanabria, en su programación. Ustedes también tienen la oportunidad de escucharme esta noche, de 10 de la noche hasta las 3 de la mañana. Y como yo siempre digo, Latino, defiende lo tuyo con orgullo. Todos unidos, entre amigos, uno para todos y todos para uno. De esa manera podemos echar para adelante, porque si no, nos caemos. Así que le quiero dar las más expresivas gracias a mi amigo, el gran Bobby Sanabria. Aquí, let's go to the end here. Uh,
Real
yep,
quick,
go
because
ahead.
people
See.
are curious about finding sources for education, like
Yeah.
that book I mentioned, the Latin Jazz, the first of the fusions. You can go right now to the web and look up Latin Music USA, which
Mm-hmm.
was a four-part series that came out in 2009
Mm-hmm.
on PBS.
Yeah.
You can see it for free on the web, Latin Music USA. You can go to YouTube, look up From Mambo to Hip Hop, a
Mm-hmm.
South Bronx Tale, an incredible documentary that Elena Martinez, my wife, produced in 2006. So those are two things that you can go to right now that you could check out in your spare time. And there's four parts to Latin Music USA. You'll love it,
Yeah.
and it talks about our contributions, especially with in terms of keeping Cuban music alive in part two and redefining it into what we call salsa
Yeah.
today.
Yeah.
So,
And so we've got here somebody else who
oh,
says thank you. And then,
check it out, check it out. Somebody mentioned Victor Paz. This
again, Nevares,
is
put it up a little bit. Put it up a little bit, just right there. There he is. Okay.
right here.
That's,
That's Victor Vitin
uh-huh,
Paz.
uh-huh,
That's Melissa Mark Viverito, who's planning on running for mayor.
uh-huh.
That's when she was a DJ at WKCR at Columbia University when she was a student. That's Candido.
Mm-hmm.
That's Little Ray Romero, the great bongocero, Puerto Riqueño from Brooklyn, New York. And that's the great Vigilio Martí, great rumbero, performer, percussionist, used to play congas with the Machito Orchestra. And that's me in a striped shirt, but no, I wasn't coming out of prison. That's just the style of shirt that I had. We were all guests on her show back way back when. Somebody mentioned Biting Paz,
Yeah,
fantastic.
Egan
And
Nevares did.
also, real quick, there's the Latin jazz camp that I run with
There it is.
Rev Montai every year at Case Western Reserve University in Cleveland, Ohio, for high school students.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, we're not doing it this year because of the pandemic, but next year we'll do it. Check it out, the Roberto Ocasio Latin Jazz Camp. You can go to the web and check it out for your high school students that are really getting into the music. For 1 week, we immerse them into the music from 9 in the morning till 10 at night, and then we finish off with a concert at the Cleveland Museum of Art. So there's a lot of resources out there. But remember, don't let anybody ever play down the role that Latino musicians have had in the history of jazz. As I've said before, if it wasn't for us, jazz would not have existed and evolved the way it has today. We have a big part to do in it.
So, before you leave, Eggy Castillo dice, sigue por 2 horas más, por favor. Bueno, mañana tenemos 2 horas porque tendremos a Martin Cohen, fundador de Latin Percussion, tremendo fotógrafo, quien estará con nosotros. Él es la persona responsable por Latin Percussion, como también es responsable por este libro que acaba de salir, que se titula Conga Heads. La persona que escribe el preludio es nada más y nada menos que Bobby Sanabria. Bobby wrote the foreword to this book, Conga Head, the autobiography of Martin Cohen. And Martin Cohen will be my guest tomorrow afternoon. We'll be joined by Professor Richard Snyder, an avid music aficionado, well-respected connoisseur of our music, who will be joining me for this conversation in which we're going to talk to the one and only Bobby Martin Cohen. And before you leave me, tell us how you see Martin Cohen's role in our history.
Well, if it wasn't for Martin, we wouldn't have instruments to play as percussionists because once Cuba got taken over on January 1st, 1959 by Fidel Castro, and the trade embargo was placed on Cuba in 1960, and then the travel embargo was placed in 1962. Not only did the source of the music stop in terms of getting it to New York, but also, and the inspiration, but also the percussion instruments.
Mm-hmm.
And all you could get at that time was maybe second-rate entry-level congas from Mexico, etc., with skins that, so thick that forget it, you need a jackhammer to play them. Timbales that were shabby, etc., etc. But Martin comes along, and because of his love, this is the interesting thing. It's all because of the love that he had for the music,
Yeah.
that he got involved in this, making the instruments for us to perform on and be and making them technically better so that they can sound better, make our jobs easier, etc. And in many cases, change the sound of the way the music is even recorded. So he has a big thing to do, and I'm very proud to say that he is like me,
Mm-hmm.
an SOB, a son of
Son of
the
the
Bronx.
Bronx. Son of the
So
Bronx.
that's going to be a fascinating
That's
conversation that you're
tomorrow.
going to have.
Yeah, tomorrow from 4 to 6. And one of my first investments after college and getting a job teaching in the Boston Public Schools, I saved money after having, furnished my apartment on Montgomery Street, a duplex apartment. I saw this at Jack's Drum Shop on Boylston Street. It's no longer there. And I passed by, and on the window, a display was this drum set right there. Tito Puente LPs, and I remember I think I paid $150. I'm gonna have to really look to see how much I paid. But in any case, I remember I saved up money. You're talking about 1973. So I saved up money from my paycheck every week. I would like put some aside, and then I'd go by the store to make sure they hadn't sold it. Right? I said, "Don't sell it. I'm gonna buy it. I'm gonna be the one to buy it." Well, and I finally bought it, of course. But
Those are that set of drums that you have. Those are collector's items.
okay,
Because so you see the green badge on the
the
bottom
LP,
that says Tito Puente. Those are the original. Those are the original drums, I believe.
yeah,
Maybe there was a slightly different design before that, but those basically are the original drums with that thin
yeah,
tripod that you have.
yeah,
Except those are very extremely valuable to collectors, and they're made out of brass, which was the
yeah,
typical metal that was
yeah,
used
yeah.
back then. And man, you're so lucky. I had a set like that, but one day, I was and that I used with Mongo,
Uh-huh.
and I have them back there somewhere, but it's amazing that you have that and that you had that foresight to get that. What happened with Jack's Drum Shop? It no longer
It closed.
exists.
Yeah, it closed down. You remember Jack's work? That was a place to hang out. That was like being in Puerto Rico. Casa Margarita was a place where everybody went to after high school. Every day you'd walk by there just to hang out. Do whatever it had to do that had to do with music.
And is the pizza shop still there? The that used to be next to it.
Emerson College has taken over that whole area. So when you come up next time, we'll take a walk by there. You're going to see how
Oh
gentrified it's
man, that
become, but
kept
not
us.
in a negative way. Not in a negative way.
Yeah, yeah. That pizza kept us alive
Oh yeah, yeah.
for
So
so many years. But let me
Conge,
tell you. Let me tell you
yeah,
something about the book.
yep.
The pictures alone are just worth the price of the book, but the historical information is priceless. So everybody should check it out.
There you go. Well, my friend, you know how much I love you. Divina sends her regards, and
Igualmente,
we're
igualmente.
looking forward to the day we can have you back in Boston performing. We're still working on how do we bring you a big band because the quartet is nice, the sextet is nice, but it's the big band where you show what you really are all about. So
Yeah,
hopefully, God
yeah.
willing, sometime in the near future we can make it
Maybe we
happen.
could come up and do West Side Story
That'd be great.
reimagined like we did at the Kennedy Center.
That'd be
And you're
great.
talking about having these programs where you have a talk beforehand.
Yep.
It's very important to do that. When we did West Side Story last year, we did it in January, right, Elena? West Side
Hmm.
Story. Uh, in any case, we did it at the Kennedy Center, and before the concert, this was this past January.
Yeah.
Me and Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor
Yeah.
we were on a panel discussion talking about West Side Story and what
Hmm.
it meant to us as New Yorkers.
Hmm.
Because what happens with West Side Story, if you're from the island of Puerto Rico and you see the movie, most people from the island of Puerto Rico look at it and they say, mira,
Yeah. Yeah.
lo están enseñando como si estando en gangas y violencia y todo. Oh, look at them, they're portraying us as gang members. People don't understand. It's not a Puerto Rican island story. It's a New York Rican story. And we had to be in gangs at that time because of the racism that we were experiencing.
Right. Right.
And it's an incredible thing that Leonard Bernstein did. It's still the hardest music ever written for a
Nuestro amigo
Broadway.
Eggy dice que cuando traiga la orquesta para hacer el show de West Side Story Reimagined, él quiere tocar maracas.
Hasta más, mi hermano, hasta más. No te preocupes.
Así
Hasta
que
más.
mañana, si Dios permite, entonces mañana los invito a cada uno de ustedes que estén con nosotros. Tenemos, como dije antes, como invitado Martin Cohen, fundador, presidente de Land Percussion Instruments, tremendo fotógrafo, inventor, bueno, una persona totalmente interesante en todo lo que tiene que ver con nuestra música y cultura. Y ha vivido tanta experiencia que I don't even know we'll have enough time in 2 hours to cover everything we need
Right.
to cover
It's an
with
amazing story. Yeah.
I showed the picture that he took earlier of Ismael Quintana and Barry Rogers and George Castro. This is part of the book. But his photography is fantastic, and his stories, of course. And he also produced music, which is the other part that we're going to talk about. Because remember, he Land Percussion Ventures, that recording part one, part two, volume one, part two, three of Learn to Play Congas and Timbales, Patato. He recorded the Latin Jazz
Perico's
Ensemble.
first recording. Perico's
Luis
first
Perico
recording.
Ortiz as well, Alfredo de la Fe, the Latin Jazz Percussion Ensemble that had Tito and that whole band that was part of the beginning of Tito's ensemble. So there's a lot of history that we're going to talk about with our friend Martin Cohen. So with that, my dear brother, I love you. God bless you. H para ti, para Elena, como siempre, y gracias por lo que tú haces. Quien tú eres, más que nada. Y para adelante siempre, y ya tú sabes que aquí te apoyamos 100 por 35, any way we can. We're here to support you, my brother. And keep up
Thank
the
you
good
so
work.
much.
I love
Fue
what
un
you're doing.
honor, un privilegio y gracias a todo, no solamente a ti, pero a todo el público que está aquí sintonizado con nosotros. Quiero darle un saludo cordial, especialmente a la comunidad puertorriqueña de la isla, nuestros ancestros allá en la isla. Yo sé que están pasando un tiempo difícil allá, especialmente en el pueblo de Yabucoa, la tierra de la ciudad de mi mamá, y también en Guánica, la ciudad de mi papá. Thank you so much, Jose, you and Divina. Thank you to everyone for tuning in, especially from the island of Puerto Rico, my ancestral homeland. I always tell my friends that, sometimes people on the island can be a little difficult. They'll say things like, tú no eres puertorriqueño because you were born and raised in New York City. You're not Puerto Rican. And I always quote the great Mariposa, the great New Yorkican poet. No te preocupes. Yo no nací en Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico nació en mí. I wasn't born in Puerto Rico. Don't worry about it. Puerto Rico was born in me. So I love you madly. Thank you so much, Jose, Divina, everybody. And remember, the pandemic is only temporary. The music is forever. Achea Lafia Onye. Peace and prosperity to everyone, all my brothers and sisters.
Thank you, my brother. Be well. Stay safe. God bless. Ache. All right, so that ends it. You can watch this show again on YouTube. My YouTube channel is Jose Maso. It's very simple. Go to YouTube channel. I'll upload it soon, and you can watch it as many times as you want. The whole 2 hours, 37 minutes plus of the program. We're on YouTube Live Saturday and Sunday. We're on Facebook Live Saturday and Sunday from 4 to 6 p.m. But the YouTube is the one that archives it, because when you go to Facebook, they knock out the music and everything of that nature. So go to YouTube and you can see it. Ya saben, aquí mi amigo Johnny Giraldo, mi maestro, me dice, I couldn't listen to the whole interview today, but we'll catch some of the recording. Tomorrow should be very interesting. I hope it's, I'm looking forward to it. But you can see it on YouTube. Ya saben, YouTube, el canal Jose Mazo. Lo ven ahí y pueden ver entonces el programa completo con nuestro invitado Bobby Sanabria, como también Chris Rogers, que estuvo con nosotros al comienzo del show. Bueno, mi gente, eso fue lo que trajo el barco. Tremenda manera de comenzar el fin de semana celebrando mi cumpleaños este miércoles, día 5 de agosto. Ya llego al 7º piso, 70 años de edad. Gracias a ustedes, gracias a mi señora esposa divina que me cuida. Así que espero que mañana podamos pasar 2 horas en comunidad y en solidaridad y en hermandad. Hasta mañana a las 4. Nos vemos. Rolando Rivera, allá en Florida. Te quiero ver. Mary Kent, I want to see you tomorrow as well. You can see the rewind of this from 2 hours plus on the YouTube channel of Jose Maso. Okay? Jose Maso, YouTube. And I'll leave you with this in the background.
Rejoice, brothers and sisters, for America's greatest art form.
Or any place where jazz is played.
It's a sacred place.
So thank you for coming to church.
Amen.
And all women too. check it out, jazz people. In the musical heart of Harlem, New York City, lives the Apollo Theater, where legendary artists represented the musical connection to Africa, the place where it all began. They gave a voice, the roots, the ancient messages that spoke through the talking drum of los Carabalí y Yoruba. El Congos, Congas y Bongos, where dance truly was mambo, mambo, which means to communicate with the gods that protected the valiant, the lucky, the blessed. And where there was unrest, there was always music to reverse the stress. The only way to connect back to the matrix, Madre Africa, and its children, sus hijos, where a musical gene seemed to gleam and come out of every pore, every scene, where a generation was immersed in a musical scene, where rhythms and songs made them kings and queens of the 1910s, 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and today. Mario Bausa was born in 1911, came straight from La Habana, playing for the Philharmonic Orchestra by the age of 9. This musical mastermind behind the music we call Latin jazz. The founding father who brought together the most amazing musicians of the time and helped birth the most beautiful music ever heard. He united big heavies like Dizzy Gillespie with Ella Fitzgerald, backed by the almighty percussionist Jono Bosso, who never learned English and didn't have to, for his syncopation carried weight and was played straight, not swung. He died too young, for the dark side of the slums carried knives and guns, and this era was certainly no exception. Racism was the norm, but despite the reform and how these dark-skinned musicians had to conform, just enough to still play for nightclubs, theaters, and dance halls filled with the big ballers of the day. Big ballers who would take weekends on holiday from Florida to Havana on a boat ride to a cabana, having mojitos and bananas and meeting girls named Ana, dancing the night away to the magical music played by the hands of witch doctors. Cándido, Mongo, Patato, Agua Bella, played rumba, mambo, son, con un poquito de bomba y plena. La familia Cepeda y Mon Rivera, Los Palmieris, Don Redman y Fletcher Henderson made Q-bop, bebop with a clave deep within. Even Tabito Vázquez y Chico O'Fahil. Morey Peraza, Bobo de los Reyes, Miguelito, Buddy Rich and Bird. Chick Webb took it away like Cab Calloway. And let us not forget the Holy Trinity, the three kings, Machito, Tito Puente y Tito Rodriguez. Los Tres Reyes, whose big band influence spanned the world over. Beethoven moved over, because as the music got older, the fusion took control and legends were molded, formed and born, like Celia Cruz, Sammy Davis Jr., Rafael Hernández y La Lupe, Desi Arnaz, Graciela, Santito Colón y Ismael Rivera. It was a magical era, a time in musical history that can never be equated or duplicated, only celebrated and venerated. The most beautiful music ever created. From 1911 and 100 years later, the magic has not faded. My name is La Bruja, and I'm so glad you made it. Bobby, take it from Havana to Harlem and the boogie down. Métele mano, check out this sound. Aquí no se usa máquina, except of course, navigating the board. Ho! J-Mo.
All right, that does it. Officially saying goodnight for tonight. I had to play that. How can I not play that? That's a great Bobby Sanabria. Um, that's the album. That was La Bruja. The Chicken from Havana to Harlem, 100 Years of Mario Bauza. Caridad de la Luz, La Bruja. And of course, Bobby Sanabria made that possible. So there you have it, my good friends. I want to thank each and every one of you for being part of the Consalsa family, for joining us. And I look forward to tomorrow, as I said before, with our special guest, Martin Cohen, founder, president of Latin Percussion, Inc., and also a great photographer. His new book, The Conga Head, is his autobiography with some great pictures and history. And we'll be joined by Richard Snyder, professor of political science from Brown University. Till tomorrow, God bless each and every one of you. Stay safe. Remember, mask, wash your hands, and 6 feet physical distance. Recuerden, mañana a las 4, de 4 a 6, nuestro invitado Martin Cohen, fundador, presidente de Latin Percussion Inc., como también fotógrafo, su libro Conga Head, su autobiografía. Como también tendremos a Richard Snyder, invitado, un profesor de ciencia política de Brown University. Y será mañana de 4 a 6 una conversación con música y también anécdotas. Así que espero que estén con nosotros. Les recordamos que siempre estén pendientes, mascarilla, lávense las manos, 6 pies de distancia física para que de esa manera podamos sobrevivir esta pandemia y llegar al otro lado sanos y salvos. Hasta entonces, que Dios los bendiga. Until next weekend, until tomorrow, God bless you all and have a good night, and thank you for being part of today's program. Until then, watch the retape on YouTube, Jose Maso. Okay, that's my channel. Ciao.